Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku had Kacchan by his side all along? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. In the retrospective thoughts of one Izuku Midoriya, Deku, certain patterns and things were often common. The sun comes out every morning, the moon comes at night, rain falls from clouds. And Katsuki Bakugo would wait in the front door of his house. He should have known how serious she was. They had been friends for a long time. Moreover, in that long time, it had been clear how serious she was with any promise she made. In all their years knowing each other, she had never once failed to deliver on her promises. So why would he think that promise, in particular, would be different? Get down here already. I refuse to be late for class. Katsuki Bakugo, Kacchan. His best and only friend. And the girl who had declared she would be his wife when they were older, a promise she had done when they met as children. She had an incredibly strong quirk. And him? He was quirkless. But that did nothing to deter the feelings of friendship they had. If anything, his quirkless status simply did the opposite. No one would dare bully Izuku Midoriya. Kacchan was the biggest defender of the quirkless boy. When she learned through her mother about the status of his friend, she was the first to go running at his home and tell him things would go well. She didn't know how they would. However, she wouldn't let it break their friendship. She was loyal and honest. With a temper that almost seemed familiar with how explosive it would be, some people had the opinion that her temper actually was faster to set than her own explosive quirk. Therefore, every day, every morning, Kacchan would come to the front door of his house. Wait for him to get out. Then they would take on the road to the school together. That had been routine for a long time now. And today was no different. Izuku, Katsuki is waiting for you in the door. Inko Midoriya smiled fondly. She had to admit it really eased her worries knowing Katsuki was always taking care of her son. The girl was explosive, there was no way to deny that, but that explosiveness in her temper also reflected in a protectiveness for her son. She could still remember the girl who had loudly proclaimed they would marry. Growing up hadn't deterred her. She still remembered her words. Moreover, every time she remembers them she cannot avoid smiling and giggling. Miss Midoriya, I have come to request the hand of your son. The girl was straightforward. She knew what she wanted and she went for it. Probably one of the many reasons that she and Izuku were friends, both loved All Might. Both wished to be heroes, and while her son was quirkless, he hadn't stopped trying his best in his studies and his collection of books he wrote about heroes. Moreover, neither his friend had stopped trying to support him. She knew that Katsuki was worried for Izuku. However, she was more worried of what would happen to Izuku if he could not follow his dreams. She was glad Izuku had a friend like Katsuki. I am going, Kacchan. Izuku went down and said his goodbye to his mother. They had to arrive to classes in time. Izuku saw Kacchan sporting her short hair that reached the end of her neck in her usual way, spikes coming on all angles. She waved at him as they walked together. In the amicable silence of the road she spoke. You are still aiming for UA, right? She tried to play it nonchalantly but Izuku knew she was still worried. I will make it, Kacchan. He spoke with a smile, trying his best to reassure the girl who did nothing but reassure him too. What he was not expecting, even though he had to get used by now, was how she brought her arm over his back, forcing him to get close to her as she spoke. That's the attitude, Deku. She spoke with her usual explosiveness. Katsuki Bakugo was in short, explosive, and pretty much moved on instincts. You better make it through. And even if you fail, you can still try to aim for the support course, right? She had the perfect plan so Izuku could enter UA. She would be the first to recognize her shortcomings in the academic area. She knew she could make it through whatever exam they placed as long as she needed to use her quirk for it. But Izuku didn't have a trouble with the academic area, so she thought that if by chance things went south, he could use those brains of his and enter the support course. So they would go together at UA and she would be able to keep seeing him in a daily fashion. She had a promise to fulfill, and she would lie if she said she didn't like the idea of teaming up with him. Long ago Deku had made a drawing on one of his many notebooks. She remembered that one in particular because it spoke of her quirk, and it spoke of his wish for them to be a team-up. She would lie if she said she didn't want that. People often dissed Izuku for his lack of quirk, but she knew him better. She knew how persistent he could be, and in an endearing way, how foolishly brave he could be when needed. He had a heart of gold, one that lived to help every time he could, because that was the right thing. He couldn't and wouldn't let things go if he could help. Kacchan. And how he would start stuttering whenever she got too close. She didn't really know when it started. They had been able to chat without him stuttering when they were younger. Well, she would lie if she said she didn't like him with all the things that made him her friend. Come on, don't start stuttering now. I am sure things will change. Izuku didn't know it back then. Nevertheless, the words of Katsuki were truer than anyone could have imagined. A lot of stuff could happen in a day. More in a world full of heroes and villains, that wasn't surprising at all. What was surprising was the fact two children were getting scolded by a lot of heroes. Well, technically speaking, Izuku was the one being scolded, Katsuki had been the victim and they were asking her if she was okay. She would look at him while they were scolding him of how reckless he had been, mentioning that if All Might had not come they would have ended up badly. Then again, she felt like shouting to the heroes that the only who dared to take a step forward was Izuku. When everyone else was standing, thinking on what they would do, Izuku had gone forward to help his friend. He had risked himself to help her. She would have done the same. But she didn't know if she would have been as fast as Izuku to recklessly go into danger, meddling into a business that wasn't his. He didn't need to risk himself, surely a hero would have come to help her. But he had been the first. Moments like those reminded her why. She had chosen to stick with Izuku. She didn't care of those who dissed her for choosing to stay with the quirkless kid. She only cared about having a good friend. And that was the reason she was walking together with him as he looked down at having being scolded by the heroes. Cheer up, you know they didn't mean anything bad. Kacchan tried to cheer the friend she could not stop thinking about. His sadness wasn't regarding his lack of a quirk, or the fact he had been scolded. It was the fact he did not get to ask the heroes for their quirks, which had impressed her. She wasn't sure why he wasn't down at the fact he didn't manage to get an autograph from All Might. Sure, it wasn't the perfect moment to ask for one, but normally she would have expected for him to ask one. What did surprise both of them was the sudden appearance of All Might. Katsuki Bakugo had one weird day. Izuku Day couldn't have been weirder even if he asked for it. Seeing his hero in front of him and telling him he could be a hero was weird, fantastic. And weird. The fact his best friend was there to see it all happening was surprising to her. She did promise to stay silent of it. The door to a dream had suddenly been opened up. A bit, but it was something. Now he would need to work hard for it. Come on. Keep running, Deku. The thing was he had not only to follow All Might plan to get his body ready for the legendary quirk of his hero, but he also had to deal with his best friend who was fully compromised in making sure he entered the hero course. What happened with the idea of me in the support course? He exclaimed, gasping for air as he rushed while Katsuki would not let him stop running with the reminder in the form of a small explosion behind him. That was before. Now you got no reason to don't give it your best. A small explosion behind him forced him to release a yelp and let the energy flow in him to keep running. Plus, didn't you say we were going to be a team? How can we be a team if we aren't heroes? Kacchan wasn't letting him slow down even if he wanted. Come on, Deku. You are not stopping until we reach the beach. And in fact he didn't stop until he reached the beach. They both got to see the figure of All Might without his muscles. He was looking at them with a smile. To be young. Izuku immediately was a stuttering mess trying to explain his relationship with Kacchan. Said girl simply kept her composure as she looked at the beach. So, he just needs to clean this place up? All Might nodded and explained to him the whole plan. To Izuku it seemed impossible. To Kacchan though, you only need to keep doing it till it's done. And so both All Might and Katsuki Bakugo were watching Izuku moving the thrash to the side. During this moment of watching, All Might spoke. So, how long you two been together? Katsuki raised an eyebrow. She wasn't expecting the question, she didn't mind it though. Is nothing formal. Not yet though, his mom has yet to give me his hand in marriage. All Might smiled at the humor of her words. That was until he noticed the deep decision in her eyes. "You are serious?" She nodded with decision. "Look at him, what's not to like?" He looked at the boy who he had considered worthy of being his successor. He saw him as an honest kid. He had yet to learn more of young Midoriya. But so far he seemed to be simply an honest boy with his priorities in place. If anything, he also had the biggest virtue of being a hero. Going forward to help. Without thinking on the consequences, but rather focused that he could help. "I guess I can see why you like him." He smiled at her. She just nodded, looking at Izuku pushing a bunch of thrash. "Just so you know, you might need to keep an eye on him. Deku tends to overwork himself when he has a set goal in place. Is as impressive as how much he can ramble about heroes." He nodded, listening to the girl explaining the many habits that surrounded young Midoriya. And the more he listened to the story of the girl, he could get two facts clearly. The most obvious was the girl was serious with her affection to young Midoriya, and the second one, Izuku Midoriya had the basis to be a great hero. He helped without understand why he did it. He would always go forward, because he was serious about being a hero. This made him smile. Mostly because the way the girl spoke of him, it was obvious she was serious on her helping Midoriya. Which raised a question. Why call him Deku? Doesn't Det means, can't do? Katsuki nodded before speaking the reason for the nickname. It can also be seen the other way. In his case, Deku means he is capable of doing anything. She offered a soft smile, looking at her friend who was gasping for air but still kept pushing the metals and thrash around to where he had been told to. She had no doubts he would make the goal All Might had told him. He looked at the girl the way she looked at her friend. He nodded. Indeed, to be young and in love was something beautiful. The gears of time would keep moving and showing progress. Come on. Rush it. Explosions were sounding behind Izuku, who managed to keep running while not getting winded. The truth was, both were rushing to the exam with worry in their heads. All Might had told them the quirk would take time to adapt to the body of Izuku. Worst-case scenario, the new inheritor of One for All would be a splatter on the floor as his whole body was ripped apart by the sheer power he now had inside. Deku was nervous. Kacchan blindly believed he could do it. The worst that could happen was he broke all his bones. As if Katsuki Bakugo was many things. And one of them was someone whose temper exploded easily. You had to go and get in the way of the zero-pointer, right? Izuku chuckled nervously as he was being cared for by his friend. She was in danger, Kacchan. She sighed as she looked at him. And you had to go and break your arms and legs to save her. How many points did that got you? He muttered in silence what she knew was a 0. Right, 0, Deku, you better get into UA one way or another, or the least of your worries will be whether or not your quirk can rip you in pieces. She threatened as explosions came from her palm. Izuku nodded nervously. And yet he couldn't deny he was happy to have a friend like Kacchan. Someone who supported him and kept on going, that he should do his best. I will blow up everyone in UA if that means getting you inside. And sometimes it was bad for his nerves. One thing was for sure guaranteed. Whether or not he got into it, he and Kacchan would keep being friends. Surely she is kidding of blowing people up. The day for Izuku Midoriya was a tense one. The mail had arrived. And that meant he had to wait for Kacchan so they could open their letters. They had promised they would open the letter of acceptance at the same time. He had mentioned that in the end that letter could be a dismissal, but she insisted that there was no chance she would fail the exam. There is no way you will fail, neither will I fail. So when the mail arrives, we will open both letters of acceptance. Don't you dare open your letter before I reach your home. And that is a big if. You weren't accepted, I will blow up everyone to get you in. She had been clear he should also avoid overexerting himself. Though, to be fair, he was trying to let his body get as much rest as possible. Recovery Girl had been clear he should let himself get the most rest he could. Sure, her quirk helped in invaluable ways, but sometimes it was good to let the body fix itself to develop resistance. Therefore, he was waiting for Kacchan to arrive. She had always been on time whenever it regarded doing something together. So he doubted he would be waiting much longer. When he heard knocking downstairs, he knew she would be rushing to his room, after the usual loudness that came from below. a smile forming in his face as he heard the loud voice of the friend who had never stopped asking the same thing since they were children. Hello, future mother-in-law. I came to open my letter with Izuku. While we are at it, have you thought about it? Izuku could hear his mother sighing. I think you are still too young, Katsuki. Why not wait a few more years? He could hear the alarm in the voice of Kacchan. But someone could steal Deku away. He heard his mother laughing lightly. I am sure you can keep other girls away from him. Didn't you do the same before? No girl would dare approach Izuku. Not only because they didn't want to do anything with the quirkless boy, but also because those girls who even dared to consider it would end up meeting the immovable defender that was Katsuki Bakugo. Boys knew not to bully Deku, not in front of her. Or where she could hear them. Sadly, the girl instincts and senses were rather strong when it came to Izuku. Moreover, the girls knew the same. Don't try to approach Izuku. Katsuki was a wall too high to try to pass. I guess I could do that. I just wanted to avoid Izuku the trouble of turning girls down. He is not good at speaking with girls, you know it. It was hard to learn to talk with girls when he only had experience with one girl. And that girl was so straightforward with her feelings that he didn't learn the normal social protocol. He heard his mother laughing as she ushered her upstairs. Izuku looked at her walking. He waved at her with his letter in hand. She smiled as they entered the room full of All Might paraphernalia. Bad news, Izuku, your mom still won't let me have your hand in marriage. Don't worry though, I am sure she will let you go one day, maybe when we finish UA and she sees what great heroes we are, she will me have your hand. Izuku chuckled nervously at the straightforward girl. In silent agreement, both opened their letters. Inside they saw what looked like a hologram projector. Before he could speak about it, she placed hers in the floor. Both were surprised at the image of All Might. Congratulations, young Bakugo. Your combat skills have more than impressed everyone. You will need some helps on your grades. But worry not, we will help you with a tutor. And what do you mean it has to be a short message? Oh, whatever. Congratulations. You are in. In a way, we are both in. For this year I will enter the lines of many teachers. And what do you mean cut? See you soon, kid. Both Izuku and Katsuki smiled at the attitude of All Might. The man had proved to be more than just one great hero. During the time he trained Izuku and chatted with Katsuki, both found out the man could be simple and with one big heart. In a way, a child at heart. Izuku looked at his projector. Thinking the small disc might not have All Might in it, or worse, All Might would be in it and apologize at him for not being able to make it. Before thoughts could sullen his mood and feed him with fears, he heard the sound of a small explosion. Not strong to make damage, but enough to make a sound to get his attention. Don't think so much about it. Now, put that thing on the floor and let's see what All Might says. She offered a smile so characteristic to her, that wild smile she would often have when facing a challenge. The smile that made Kacchan. With a nod, he placed the projector and both were greeted with a view to All Might back. Is it recording? Oh sorry. Young Midoriya. I am surprised. When Bakugo spoke of your academic prowess I was impressed, and seeing your work in the written exam I am even more impressed. So, I should mention, you might want to spend some time with her tutoring her on subjects and… Short message, right? As you know, you didn't got 1 point in combat. At this, he was about to look down before he felt Kacchan hitting him in the shoulder. Don't. Keep looking. All Might seem to be smiling broadly. But, we are a hero academy. What academy wouldn't reward points to someone who saved someone in the need of help? You see, there were rescue points. We didn't mention this. Short message, right? Both laughed at how much pressure All Might seemed to be in. The point is, you got enough rescue points to enter. And even to place you in the number 1 rank. Congratulations, young Midoriya. I am sure young Bakugo will be happy to share the news. With those words, Izuku wasn't able to hear anything else. His eyes were bursting with tears of happiness. As those tears flowed, the girl at his side was loudly yelling in victory. Both had made it. Both got into UA. Both were going to be heroes as they always hoped. This calls for celebration. I must tell mother-in-law. Pretty much jumping away in long steps, she rushed downstairs to share the news with the mother of Izuku. The woman's reaction was the same as his son as she started crying. Katsuki Bakugo kept shouting in victory the whole time. And while no one might have been able to see it, small tears of happiness, so small they passed in hiding, coming from the rim of her eyes. Deku had made it. And that made her happy. First day. One always loves his first day at schools, well, mostly. Izuku was having a clash of the feelings of his first day in UA. His dream was real. He would be able to go to the best academy, and what's more, see All Might. Make new friends who would not judge him. Well, he hoped to not make a mess of himself. But he was already to a poor start. He had been following a guy with a quirk that seemed to make him of metal. He wanted to ask him about it, but he ended up getting lost in the hallways. During this PRD of being lost, he ended up clashing with a girl. The girl had long silky hair, but what caught Izuku's attention wasn't the burning mark on her face. Oh no, what caught his attention was how cool her hair was. It was white and red, perfectly divided in half. The right side was white as snow and the left one was a vibrant red. He wondered if it was because of her quirk. Izuku's wonder went away to become embarrassment as he stood up and offered his hand to the girl. Sorry, I did not mean to crash with you. Are you okay? The girl's eyes opened in surprise at this boy who was not surprised at her burn mark. She had gotten used at people staring at the burnt mark in her clear skin. It really managed to come out. She hated it, but she hated more when people stared at it with disgust or sadness. They didn't know anything about her. Now this boy was looking at her with something different. She would even dare say it resembled the look her sister gave her when she took her to try clothes. Wonder? Did the boy really had wonder in his eyes? The wonder went away to turn into embarrassment. She dismissed him with a nod. I am okay. Now, would you move? The boy nodded and moved out of her way. I am sorry. He apologized to her. She simply nodded and left. Why feel sorry? Why look at her with wonder? Many questions, and sadly she wasn't so sure she wanted to ask them, but she would lie if she said she wasn't curious of the boy who had so much wonder in his eyes. Once the girl had gone her way, Izuku found himself taken away by Kacchan. Really? Getting lost? Don't you dare tell me you saw an interesting quirk and followed them. Izuku's silence might as well have been a confession of his acts. Well, you are lucky we are still on time, come on. The girl linked his arm with him as they rushed to the classroom. For their luck, the teacher had yet to come. We made it on time, no thanks to you, Deku. For anyone who would look at them from an outsider perspective, she might have looked angry. It wasn't hard to think that of Katsuki Bakugo. However, Izuku knew she wasn't angry. She was just bothered that they would have ended up coming late on their first day. I am sorry, Kacchan, but thank you for helping me. She smiled at him, the same sort of feral smile she had all the time. She released his arm only to give him a palm in the back. You are welcome. No way I am going to let you get lost. Some students looked at the pair with curiosity. Some got close to them. A girl in particular seemed to smile at them. It's you. From the exam. The girl with brown hair waved at them excitedly and approached them fast. At their side a tall student with glasses was also approaching without speaking a word. Katsuki saw this. A pincer attack. They were getting from both sides. And as much as she wanted she couldn't stop both, so she had to choose to deal with the bigger threat. So with a small push, she sent Izuku in the direction of the guy with glasses as she looked straight at the girl from the exam. Hands off. She expressed with her palm facing the girl direction that halted at the order. Her smile never fading. Kacchan, right? You remember me? Buchako? We were together in the exam, you were with Deku when he saved me. She looked excited at seeing them both. And why wouldn't she be excited? Both of them had saved her. Deku had saved her from the zero-pointer. And when a small debris started falling over them, Kacchan had come and blown the debris away from them. She hadn't obtained rescue points due to the way she got rid of the debris ended up making it fall over other candidates of the test. But the point was both had saved Ochako. And she was thankful to them, and she was also happy seeing the girl who had so protectively hugged Deku when he was in the ground. Ochako, yeah, sure. Just don't touch Deku again and we will be okay. She hadn't forgotten how the girl had touched Deku. She said it had been necessary to use her quirk. She would keep her on watch. Meanwhile, Izuku was greeting the tall student with glasses that presented himself as Ida. So you can accelerate? Indeed. I can reach fast speeds, but I need to be careful to not overheat my own legs. Izuku nodded, mentally taking notes of the quirk of Ida. It was a fun comparison. Both boys were speaking amicably about quirks and heroes. And the Katsuki was discussing to the girl the ground rules as to avoid Izuku. You respect that and we won't be having any problems. Ochako nodded, offering a smile to her. So that means we are friends? She looked excitedly at her. Katsuki couldn't avoid groaning at the girl attitude. It was obvious she wouldn't be getting a no for an answer. Sure. Just, no funny business with Deku. She exclaimed loudly, and the girl nodded excitedly, speaking of how happy she was they could be friends. Katsuki was internally groaning. Maybe the best option would have been to simply send the girl away with an explosion. Maybe another time. Izuku was smiling at hearing Kacchan. Not because of her proclamation of staying away from him, but because she had made a friend. Since she always was sticking with him, Kacchan had no girlfriends to spend time with. Not that she cared, but Izuku cared. He wanted her to be able to make lots of friends. And he always felt a tad guilty she had no other friends aside of him. Why would I want more friends? I already got you, and that's more than enough for me. She was always honest. But still, Izuku wanted her to make more friends. Maybe both of them would make a lot friends. That would be great. Katsuki was thinking something similar. That if Deku made more friends, maybe he would no longer stick with her? How silly. Even if he made friends, he would still have her. And if he even tried to get rid of her, he would get an explosion for his problems. They were best friends. Nothing and no one would take that title away of her. She took a look to the others in the classroom. Everyone was already in their small groups of friends. Everyone except for a girl who seemed to be looking at her. Except she wasn't looking at her. She was looking at the one behind her. Not the tall guy with glasses. Ida. No, she was looking at Deku. She moved to the side to block her view of Deku. She was met with a look of cold indifference. A look that spoke how superior she felt and how she thought she could get rid of them with little to no trouble. She couldn't wait to make that look of her face disappear. She would blow that look away and replace it with one of anger at being defeated. Her thoughts were broken as a man in a sleeping bag came. Honestly, Izuku had not expected a test to their quirks. It should have been sort of obvious. Die. It didn't surprise him either that Kacchan had a blast with it. She was always using her quirk in more physical ways than just rely in her quirk alone. He would have to try his best to pass the tests. Needless to say, he was really aiming for a test in which he could use his quirk without the risk of ripping himself horribly. He did have to at least place remarkably in something if he wanted to avoid being last place. What is the worst that could happen? The whole class was walking to a mock building for a special combat class. Everyone was speaking between themselves. Katsuki and Izuku were chatting between themselves. But the proper way to express it would be to say she was still angry about Eraserhead. I swear I am getting Eraserhead. Katsuki was angry. Mostly because Eraserhead had almost failed Deku. Is okay, Kacchan. In the end, no one was going to be expelled, and he is right. I need to learn to use my quirk. I can't go around breaking my arm every time. Katsuki grunted. The logic was solid. She couldn't disagree. But that didn't mean she had to like it. Still, he could see another solution. One day he will be unable to see me, and then. She released a small explosion from her hand. Didn't wishing to make a mess before class. Izuku nodded nervously. I am sure that won't be needed, Kacchan. She grunted. You need to learn to be angry, Deku. Some people can only learn through bursting their thick skulls. She was smiling at the concept of fighting. Today they would have a chance to show off their talents in a more combat-oriented setting. She might not be one for academics, but she was all for combat. Once they reached the zone, they would be fighting, and All Might brought out what looked like cheat sheets. Izuku and Katsuki were surprised. But at the same time, they had the chance of knowing the man. He wasn't a teacher, so prepping a class was something new to him. Well, everyone, today you will get in groups of 2. One side will be the villains and another one will be the heroes. He changed the sheet he was reading. We will be following the battle that will take place in the building behind me with cameras so we can analyze how you fight and react in the setting. Izuku and Katsuki felt a little bit bad that the building was at the left of All Might and not behind him. He must have worked hard on those cheat sheets and forgot where to stand. So, please come forward and get a numbered ball from the urn. You will pair up with whoever your number matches. All Might remained silent and looked at the sky. He looked like a man who was in great thought and felt great shame. As if asking for redemption. He threw the cheat sheets aside and spoke with his usual smile back again. But since this is our first combat class, you can choose your teammate for this activity. We will decide who plays villains and heroes through a coin toss. So get in pairs. All Might was screaming inside. He had forgotten the urn with the numbered ball. He made a promise to himself in that moment. He would be more careful while prepping for classes. It wasn't so easy as others made it look. The students started gathering between themselves making pairs. Katsuki didn't lose a second to get Izuku immediately close to her. I am with Deku. All Might saw the pair and smiled at them. He should have thought they would do that. Or more exactly, that young Bakugo would take the chance to be with young Midoriya. Young love was beautiful indeed. By the end the teams were made, and the coin toss had been done to decide who would play hero and villain roles. Izuku and Katsuki had been the hero team. They would be facing the team of Ida and Shudo. Izuku spoke to Katsuki as they were using the prep time they had been given to form a plan to capture the villains or get the weapon inside the building that they would be hiding. Kacchan, we don't know her quirk. We can't rush forward. Izuku tried to explain a plan to Katsuki but she wouldn't budge. No Deku, this is one of those times I told you about. We need to make clear through her thick skull that she can't look down on us. Izuku sighed. He knew he wasn't going to win this discussion. But he knew how to make her listen. Okay, then you want to fight her? She immediately nodded, showing her smile at the idea of the plan. We don't know what is her quirk, but I could act as a bait. He rushed his hand to her face. He knew she didn't like the idea of him being bait. That way, when she tries to get me with her quirk, you will be able to know what she can do. She groaned. A solid plan. She didn't like the idea of him playing bait. Why do you even think that will work? She didn't expect the answer he said. Because I trust you, Kacchan. I know you won't let her hurt me. He spoke with decision. When she looked at his face full of the decision, she found herself unable to say no. Instead, she placed her hand on his back and brought him close to her. Look at you, Deku. Speaking like a true hero. At this he ended up feeling embarrassed at the close contact with the explosive girl. Kacchan. She laughed as she released him and nodded. We will go with your plan then. I will leave the smarts to you, and you leave the combat to me. He nodded with a smile at her. They had a plan. The prep time was over. The time for action was beginning. Izuku walked alone through the halls, steadily making his way through the stairs to reach the upper floors. Katsuki was always sticking close to him like a shadow. She knew the distance she could cover with an explosion in order to get him out of whatever happened. To the surprise of both students, they ended up seeing the girl of red and white hair sitting idly in the base of the stairs for the next floor. She looked at Izuku before standing up. Only you came? Izuku got into a stance ready to fight, but it was in fact a stance ready for him to jump away. He was waiting for her to use her quirk. I guess that makes it easier. In a fast motion she let her hand fall to the floor. The whole hallway frosting away. Had Katsuki been standing in the hallway she would have gotten her feet frozen just like Izuku. Izuku had cold feet. Literally, the ice had come fast. It covered the distance in a faster time he would have predicted of a quirk like that. But it gave him his answer. The girl could create ice. Judging by the way the ice came, also manipulate it. Well, now that you are unable to move, I only need to get your partner, the loud girl. She started walking close to Izuku. Looking at his eyes as she walked closer. She was trying to find disgust. Maybe if she got closer she would get an honest reaction out of him. There was simply no way he looked at her with wonder. Who would look at a monster with such eyes? Her reflection got cut short at the blinding explosion that came from the back of the hallway. Hands off, cold hands. Her sight had been cut momentarily. The next thing she felt was a kick to her stomach. Katsuki had thrown herself straight at her after the explosion. A flashy explosion. Bad for damage, great for distraction. She used the girl as leverage to hold Deku and send herself flying again, removing him from the thin layer of ice. Whatever the girl had planned, she didn't expect for Izuku to get help. Hands off from Deku. Once she got him to her, she nodded at him and he knew the rest of the plan. He took to run. Before the girl could place her hand on the floor, she was greeted with a flying Katsuki. She had propelled herself with an explosion to cut the distance between them. Your opponent is me. Don't you dare look away from me. Before she could hit the girl, she found herself trapped in a block ice. She had been trapped. But the plan was done. Izuku had managed to get up. And getting out of the ice wasn't going to be hard. The girl forgot to enclose her hands in ice. An explosion close to herself burst through the ice. It hurt. But she was free and ready to fight. And what's more, ready to fight again. What were you going to try with Deku? The girl looked sad at her. None of your business. I will become the #1 hero, so I don't need to explain anything to anyone below me. She got into a stance, clearly intending to fight. What she wasn't expecting was the loud laugh of the explosive girl. The #1 hero? Sorry, they're cold hands, but the #1 spot is reserved, and the #2 with it. But you can keep the 3rd spot. She smiled as she got ready for a fight. The girl was looking at her with cold indifference before speaking. Who is #1? She smiled to answer, getting ready to send explosions at the girl. Either me or Deku. So get ready for an explosion in your head. Katsuki Bakugo had a clear objective. Blowing that indifferent look from the girl's face. But there was another objective. One not so clear. As she dodged the ice that was trying to capture her, she looked at the stairs behind the girl she was fighting. She looked indifferently at her. And she only kept using one hand to make ice. Slowly and steadily her body seemed to be getting signs of the ice enveloping it. If she could make use of the ice so she got slower, she could pass through and get with Deku. Ida, if she remembered from what Deku mentioned, had a speed quirk. Deku quirk didn't make him faster, only stronger. But there was not much use in being able to destroy a giant robot if you couldn't reach said giant robot. Surrender. You simply cannot hope to defeat me. The girl threw more ice in her direction. This time she wouldn't be able to dodge. She didn't want to dodge it. She managed to throw one big explosion in front of her. Loud and showy. The sort of explosion that makes everyone confused when it happens. Deku had offered her that idea one day. Most of her explosions would blow everything away. But she could manage to make a different explosion. One louder and with a bigger area of effect in exchange for losing power. But the lost power was compensated with the ability to stun those close to the explosion. A stun grenade. And that would make the girl with the cold hands to stop shooting ice. She wasn't sure what happened. One moment she was on the offensive. The next she found herself disoriented. With a scream of power, she managed to make ice come all around her, hoping to catch the girl who had disoriented her. But she didn't hear any response. No sign of having caught her. As her vision came back, she noticed she was surrounded by ice. Her own quirk having made a wall of ice in the stairs. But no signs of the girl. She had gone away. Probably past her. It was needless to say how angry she felt at having been played. Ida and Izuku were in a standstill. Ida was making sure Izuku didn't get forward. But he couldn't play it with risk. He had to be safe to avoid Izuku's strong quirk. If he got caught by Izuku, he would probably get hurt. He had seen the zero-pointer get destroyed. Of course, Izuku wouldn't use the same degree of strength. But it was better to be safe than sorry. 1 minute left. The voice of All Might forced Izuku to rush forward. Ida moved fast and slid in order to trip him. The tactic worked. But Izuku was hoping Ida to do just that. As he was falling, he used his quirk. Energy working its way along his arm. He pushed himself from the floor, sending himself to the mock weapon. He felt the pain of his arm hurting to the max but not breaking. A small victory. Ida accelerated himself to get to Deku. With a jump and the burst of speed, not only did he manage to catch him and pin him to the wall, but he had essentially stopped him from getting the mock weapon. Ida smiled to himself. He had done his job properly. Hero team wins. Ida's thoughts broke away. He looked at the bomb and saw Katsuki touching the bomb with one hand and looking at Ida with a mix of pride and smugness in it. Well, we won now. Mind letting Deku away from the wall? Ida apologized to Izuku. The latter saying there was nothing to worry about as he was doing his role. You are one great villain, Ida. He offered his hand at Ida. Ida looked at said hand with a smile and accepted the handshake. Izuku said with a smile, trying to cheer the speedster. Normally one wouldn't like to be called a great villain. But Ida got the message on the words of Izuku. Please get out of the building in an orderly fashion, we will keep the matches going. The three nodded. Ida, noticing the count of heads, spoke. What happened with Todoroki? At this Izuku looked at Katsuki. Kacchan? Where is she? Said girl shrugged. Who knows, I made a stun grenade and left her alone. The objective was to win. Not to knock her out, you said it yourself, Deku. Follow the plan. She said, pulling him close to her and managing to make her embarrassed. Ida, seeing their partnership, nodded in approval. Such a good show of teamwork. As expected of two fellow students of UA. I thought you wanted to send an explosion to her head, Kacchan. Said girl nodded. Oh, and I did, Izuku. A stunning explosion to her face. You should have seen her, that smug face fading to become a face of despair at knowing she lost. She might be exaggerating what happened, but Izuku got a general idea. Ida meanwhile was curious. I thought your quirk was making explosions. She nodded at him, her smile growing wildly at the concept. I can make explosions, but there are many types of explosions. Deku one day thought maybe I could pull something like a stun grenade. Big, showy and loud. Of course it doesn't pack a punch like my usual explosions. But it opens up the chance for a big one. Izuku sighed. I thought of that so she could stun people instead of hurting them. At this the girl laughed. If they think they can mess with me and get away freely, they are wrong. The truth of the stun grenade was that Deku had thought of the move for her. So she could have more than simple explosions. He thought it would help her to have more options. What he didn't expect was the fact she would see it as a gift. You spend all that time thinking on me? You didn't need to, but I am glad you think of me so much. His intention was to help her. But it seemed it only fueled her wishes for marriage. As they finally got out of the building, they were met with their group and the face of a said Todoroki looking at Katsuki. The latter simply smiling smugly at her. Want a rematch, Icicle? She said, looking at the said girl who looked said. Kacchan, don't, you won, no need for bragging. After saying that, Izuku went forward and offered his hand to Todoroki. Good match, your quirk is amazing. Can you only do ice? Why is your hair of two colors, is it related to your quirk? I am sorry if Kacchan made you angry, she doesn't really mean it, she is really nice when you get the time to know her and Shakan. Before he could keep rambling, a small explosion took him out of his line of thought. Deku, rambling again, focus. He looked at her with a nod, thanking her for it. My point is, sorry if she made you angry, it was a good match. She looked at the hand and at the boy offering it. She shook it lightly. She thought the hand was weird. It was warm. Not the warm she got from her fire, but a different warm. One she wouldn't mind keeping close. In fact, Izuku was getting nervous at the look the girl was giving his hand as she didn't release it. He was getting nervous. Katsuki was getting sad. She walked forward and freed the hand of Izuku away of Todoroki. Enough cold hands, Deku is off limits. She said, looking angry. The rest of the class who had been looking at the whole situation were noticing that maybe Midoriya and Bakugo were closer than they thought. Todoroki, thinking in a similar line, spoke. Says who? Are you his girlfriend? She spoke with cold indifference. But a part of her, a part deep inside of her, hoped that the girl answer would be no. To her surprise, said girl eyes opened up in surprise. Well, no, not yet. But Deku is mine. This slip of her tongue managed to make everyone stare at Deku. One boy, in particular, was about to speak up before All Might coughed loudly to gather everyone's attention. Well, this was good. But can we focus on class? The next team enter the building. As prep times go, we will review what went well and what went wrong. Everyone nodded and listened. By the end the analysis had been that Midoriya and Bakugo plan to stay close to help each other was good. All Might made clear to them that being bait was not a good part of the plan. Risking yourself to a more dangerous quirk could be fatal. It was agreed that if Todoroki had stayed with Ida defending, they would have been able to stop both of them. Ida was congratulated as he kept his role of defending the mock weapon. Bakugo got a small praise. All Might explained to them that it had been a good move to stop fighting Todoroki to help Izuku. As if they kept fighting in separate fronts, they would have lost. The rest of the matches went well, some even had fun results. Ochako had managed a victory by making herself float away to the mock weapon while her teammate distracted them with lighting. She was worried because the said teammate was salivating a lot by the end. She later found out that his quirk had that side effect if he released too much electricity. Katsuki had promised she would kill Mineta if he even dared to approach her, as through the cameras they heard him speaking of girls in a rather crude way. By the end All Might smiled to himself. Class had been a success. Sure, he forgot the urn but had avoided mayhem. And so long as no one ever found out, no one would make fun of his rookie mistake as a teacher. As the day finished and everyone was making their way home, Ochako, Ida, Izuku, and Katsuki were chatting. Well, most of the talk was made by Ochako. Ida and Izuku nodded while Katsuki was considering if there would be problems by causing an explosion to get away from Ochako. She knew the girl meant well. But she spoke as much as Deku did. Then she heard something directed to her. It was so romantic how you told Todoroki to get away of Deku. At this, she laughed off. I was going to send her to die right then and there. No one can get Deku but me. She smiled proudly as Ida wondered in thought. So, are you two in a sort of compromise? Izuku knew that question would bring an answer he didn't want to hear. Of course we are. I am going to marry Deku. She spoke proudly, getting said Deku close to her. The latter one was embarrassed. Ochako was smiling and Ida looked surprised. He spoke his question. Aren't you two too young to get married? At this she groaned. Not you two. Is enough with mother-in-law saying that. At this, both Ochako and Ida asked about this to get the answer from Izuku. She means my mom. At this both of classmates muttered a small "oh" of understanding. Katsuki meanwhile kept speaking. I have been telling her to let me have Deku hand in marriage for a long time. But she doesn't budge. I don't know why. We are perfect for each other. During this whole exchange, she never let go of Izuku, whose face had been getting redder and redder the whole time. Ochako simply smiled. It was obvious Kacchan was really in love with Deku. Even if she had her own unique way of showing it. As they reached the station and were waiting for their respective trains, they heard a voice through the announcement system. We apologize, Mountain Lady had a fight with a giant villain and the lines got affected. Don't worry, they will be fixed in 1 hour. We apologize for any inconvenience this might cause. The train system will work again in 1 hour. We apologize for the inconveniences. At this Katsuki groaned. Mountain Lady. Surely she was showing off again. Izuku sighed. He knew Katsuki didn't really like Empty Lady, mostly because she felt that in trying to show off she often failed to do her job. I am sure that wasn't the case. Surely Kamui Woods is helping fix everything. It was no secret Kamui Woods was a great hero. It wasn't a secret either how good he was at damage control. His quirk had a versatility that allowed him to really shine. Ida sighed. Well, we have 1 hour before the systems get working. Ochako didn't saw it as a bother. Instead she saw it as an opportunity to find out more about her friends. So Kacchan, how did you and Deku meet? You make it sound like you two have been friends since, well, forever. At this she got mixed reactions. A reaction from Izuku crossing his arms motioning for a no, and a reaction of nodding from Kacchan, who smiled at the idea. Two things got her pumped. Fighting like a hero. And Deku. That is a great story. You see, when I barely was getting my quirk, a small girl with blonde hair was alone in the sandbox of a park. Her mother was sitting on a bench sighing, looking at her small girl. She was alone. No one was approaching her. She couldn't blame them. Her girl was making explosions with her hands. The other kids avoided her. Maybe bringing her to the park had been a mistake. Then a woman with green straight hair sat at her side on the bench. Is this place taken? The blonde woman chuckled. Go ahead, is free to anyone brave enough. The others saw the girl alone. Oh, she looks just like you. She thanked her for the compliment. It was then she took notice of a small boy walking to the sandbox. He saw the girl making explosions and his face got brighter as with small steps he rushed to her. He spoke with wonder in his voice. That's your quirk? Said girl looked at him nodding. Her face was gloomy. After kids said that they would run away. That's cool. Said girl looked with surprise at the green-haired boy. Can you do it again? She immediately nodded and made another explosion. This one slightly bigger and making the sand get over their heads. She was worried she might have hurt the boy. Instead he heard him laughing. That's so cool. Your quirk is great. They were chatting. Nothing big, who was their favorite hero, their names, and where they lived. Once finished the girl didn't look so gloomy. At that moment the girl took the hand of the boy, happiness in her expression. Both children got in front of the bench where their mothers were sitting at seeing the exchange between their children. The small girl brought the boy in front of her mother as if making an offering, or like a kid asking if they could keep a dog. Mom, I want to marry Izuku. Can I marry him? Said woman laughed. And the mother of the boy laughed too at the innocence. I guess so, why don't you promise it to Izuku? She nodded and looked at Izuku. I promise we will get married, Izuku. The girl took the stunned boy into a hug. From that moment their paths got linked with each other. And they wouldn't get separated no matter what. Or they would get an explosion from me. Anyone who tries to take Deku away will die. Ochako and Ito were surprised at the story. Katsuki had been a nice child. Honestly, with how foul-mouthed she was, they couldn't imagine her being all innocent and even gloomy. The explosive girl was a walking bomb. She let her emotions and thought out without a care. But it also showed how good she was at keeping promises. Time hadn't been able to break them apart. That's beautiful. So you two will get married one day? She nodded with her smile growing wild. I only need the approval of his mom. Once that is out of the way we can marry right then. Ito was in thought looking at Izuku. What about Katsuki, mom? Does she approve of you? He sighed nodding. She said that no one is crazy enough to marry her, so she would be extremely thankful if I marry Kacchan. Hearing this, Katsuki temper exploded again. That hag. I am great. Anyone would wish to marry me. Which is a shame for them because I already chose Deku. Finishing her words, she took the boy close to her again with a smile on her face. Really, Ochako and Ida didn't know whether that smile was one would call loving. It looked like the smile of someone that was about to challenge someone to a fight. Don't worry, Deku, I am not leaving you for any other guy. He felt embarrassed by the closeness with her. But he had to admit, he wouldn't change his friend for anyone. I guess Todoroki worries you then? She was holding Izuku's hand rather tightly. Ochako's words broke the smile off her face to turn it into a look of a fighter. It wasn't a big change with her really. That girl. The nerve, there is only one rule to follow, hands off from Izuku. Next time she tries something like that. She released a small explosion. Ochako and Ida wondered how used were Izuku at seeing the explosions. He didn't flinch when she did them. The answer was probably a lot. Kacchan, I am sure she is not like that. Katsuki looked at Izuku. Her eyes looking for something deep within him. And she found it as she pointed her finger at him, accusing him. You found her pretty, don't you? At this, Izuku's face became red. He was a dead man walking. And he knew it. Is the hair isn't? I knew I should have let mine longer. That's why you like Mountain Lady, isn't? Ochako found this scene adorable. Katsuki didn't strike her as someone who worried about her looks, but it seemed that she took Deku's opinion highly. Ida wondered that maybe the words of Katsuki's mom were true. No one but Deku seemed to be able to manage the girl temper and all her attitudes. Is not like that, Kacchan. You are also pretty. At this the girl stopped. For a moment Izuku thought she had relaxed at being called pretty. He didn't mention it much, but Katsuki was a pretty girl. But things weren't so easy. She pointed at him again. This time with a mix of anger in her eyes. You said also, so you do find her pretty. As Izuku tried to calm her down, Ida and Ochako smiled at the pair. It was obvious they were good friends, maybe the best of friends. Meanwhile, an observer who was waiting for her own train passed a hand through her hair, asking herself a question. Did he find her hair pretty? As Izuku and Katsuki lived close to each other, they were on the same train making their way home. They had sent a message to their families explaining about the train delay. During the ride, Katsuki would look at Izuku and pass a hand through her hair. Once they were out of the train, Izuku spoke. "I don't mind your hair not being long. It suits you, Kacchan." Said girl only smiled as she offered him a pat on the back. "Of course it suits me. It's me we are talking about, everything suits me." Said girl wouldn't admit it. Not openly. But those words meant a lot to her. Just as much as the fact that in the train station he had called her pretty. Sure, he had said also. But small victories. What's the worst that could happen? Would the girl try a move on Deku? As if, needless to say, Katsuki was rather sad at lunch the next day. Todoroki had come to sit with them on the table in the cafeteria of the school. "What are you doing?" She spoke while keeping her anger in check. It was too early on the day to get so angry. "I am sitting. I think that's obvious." At this, a tick mark was forming in the head of Katsuki. Izuku was surprised she hadn't released an explosion at the obvious sarcasm in the voice of the girl with the ice quirk. "You know damn well what I mean. Why are you sitting beside Izuku?" Answer: cold hands. Katsuki would always sit at the left from Izuku. Boys. So, finding that as Izuku sat in his usual spot to her right, that someone had disrespected the rules of keeping their hands off from Deku, she was angry. "I like this spot, is not occupied either." Todoroki had taken to sit to the right of Izuku. Essentially, the inheritor of the All Might quirk was trapped between two girls who didn't plan on moving. "And could you stop calling me cold hands? Only my right side makes ice. I have a name. Is Yukiko Todoroki. You can either call me Yukiko or Todoroki, whatever is easier for you." She was elegantly eating as Katsuki anger was spiking. But before it could blow up, Izuku spoke. "You said your right side makes ice, so what does your left side does?" At this the girl tensed. She didn't like saying it. She didn't even like accepting it existed. She looked at the boy whose eyes were full of wonder. She couldn't avoid answering him. "I can release fire from my left side. My quirk is called Fire and Ice." Izuku's eyes opened up as he smiled. "That's incredible. There's so much you can do." Izuku's eyes lighted up at this. Katsuki groaned. She knew that now she wouldn't be able to make the girl go away. Not without Deku insisting for her to stay. He had found an interesting quirk, and he was all about analyzing them, a notable ability that she respected. But she hated that this meant she now would be unable to make the girl go away. Said girl looked at her food, finding it more interesting. "Is not that great? Is a bad quirk?" At this, Izuku's eyes were in surprise before he looked confident. Katsuki sighed. She knew Deku. She already saw it coming to the words he would speak. "That's your quirk? That's so cool. But it is your quirk. Every quirk is awesome." Maybe not the exact same words as for her quirk. But she knew he would say something like that. Yukiko saw into the eyes of Izuku, who had clearly spoken those words. He had said her quirk was awesome. And that it was her quirk. Not her father quirk. She found herself smiling. A small smile. She wasn't used to the feeling of smiling like that, but she didn't mind it. When Katsuki saw that smile, she only found one word to describe the current situation. She knew pretty well those eyes. Those were the eyes she herself had when thinking of Deku. And she ended up loudly speaking the words in her mind. "Hell no." Chapter: Unwanted Rival. Sister knows best. Let us try. Inko Midoriya was many things. A proud mother, loving wife, and the best cook in the humble opinion of Izuku and the not-so-humble opinion of Katsuki, who swore there was no one better than her at cooking. But she also was used at having Katsuki in her home asking questions or expressing her thoughts. At this time in the weekend, Izuku had gone running saying he needed to keep working his body. Katsuki had appeared a bit later asking if they could chat. She kindly nodded at the girl, expecting the usual questions regarding the hand of Izuku. She was not expecting the girl rant about a classmate of theirs. And then she wouldn't stop looking at him. Katsuki was angry. She held the cup she had given her with tea tightly. Mostly because by holding something in her hands, she was repressing herself of causing explosions. Inko had a strict rule that there would be no explosions in her home. One can only call the firefighters so many times in the same week. She had the same eyes as me. Inko felt it was a weird reason to be angry. I am sorry, Katsuki, but I fear I don't see anything bad in the girl having the same eye color as you. At this he groaned before speaking. She looks at Deku the same way I do. I saw it in her eyes. At this Inko couldn't avoid laughing. It was so different to see Katsuki angry at something like that. I don't see what the problem is. Isn't Izuku your boyfriend already? She said it teasingly and noticed the shyness that suddenly came to Katsuki. I haven't asked him. Inko had trouble hearing it, and even more so to believe it. You have never asked him? But you want to marry him. At this Katsuki nodded. I thought that as we were best friends and there was no one else who wanted Deku, that I could just jump straight to marrying him. Sometimes Inko Midoriya forgot how cute Katsuki could be. Right now was one of those moments. Still, she had to speak the truth of the deal. I know, but the thing is, if Izuku and you are not a couple, this girl, you said her last name was Todoroki? She nodded. Todoroki has as much chance as you in that case. If she does ask Izuku to be her boyfriend, she has all the right to do so. I know is not what you wanted to hear, but the thing is you two are not a couple. She spoke with kindness. She knew how much Katsuki liked her son. Still, there was no use in lying. The girl needed to know the full facts. She was surprised at seeing her nod. It was obvious she was angry. She already has the advantage of Deku thinking she is pretty, in her long hair. Inko looked at Katsuki that signified one thing only. Language. Sorry, but is arg. She was having a hard time avoiding to explode the teacup and to swear. However, that wouldn't earn her points with the mother of Izuku. Even less in asking for his hand. Don't worry about it, Katsuki. Maybe she is just thankful. You know Izuku has that effect on people. Said girl smiled knowingly. While the others in her old school may not have appreciated, she knew people like Ida and Ochako did appreciate Deku. And that was exactly what worried her. She saw in Todoroki something similar to herself. Both were women with the decision and the fire to reach for the #1 hero position. They obviously had good combat instincts. She knew the stun explosion trick wouldn't work again. Not while she was expecting it. What's more, as much as she hated to say it, Todoroki was pretty. She carried herself with a regal aura. As if she thought she was better than the others. And sadly she had the feeling that she did have the necessary skill to back her claim. There was just too much she didn't know about Yukiko Todoroki. Maybe you are right, maybe I am just seeing too much into it. Of course I am seeing way too much into it. It's not like she could get a crush on Deku just because he was kind to her. She started laughing loudly at the idea. Meanwhile Inko Midoriya was simply thinking that what Katsuki described was the exact same thing that actually happened in the past. She hoped this Todoroki girl wasn't like Katsuki. Otherwise her son would be getting into one big problem. But what were the chances it would be like that? Surely she was only thankful, right? Fuyumi Todoroki was having a surprising phone call from her sister. Fuyumi, how do you know if you like someone? Fuyumi cursed under her breath as her teacup ended up falling to the floor. The good thing was that it was made of plastic, so it wouldn't break by such a fall. Still the surprise was there. Her little sister had just asked her for advice. Not that they didn't speak. It's just her sister never called for something like that. She often spoke as if she was reporting the situation on her home with her brother and Endeavor. She had to admit it was hard to call him Dad. Fuyumi. She got out of those thoughts and focused on the phone call. Sorry Yuki, mind repeating that? My phone reception was bad for a moment. Said girl repeated the question. How do you know if you like someone? She knew she would have dropped her teacup again if she hadn't leave it in the table next to her. Oh well, you want to spend more time with them, you wish to know all about them, you want them to spend time with you, not because they can get anything, but simply because you like having them close. Well, you want them always to be with you. She was no expert in romance. Honestly, she was still single. Still, she had her crushes in high school and knew a thing or two about romance. Okay, she didn't know anything of romance outside of the usual advice on television. However, she couldn't say that to Yuki. I see. How can I know if they like me back? At this, she cursed. She didn't know much. And in a joking manner she spoke. You can always ask them. She heard humming on the other side. I see. Thanks, Fuyumi. Have a good day. She heard the beeping sound of the phone call ending. Yuki. 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 She cursed under her breath. Hopefully she understood she was kidding. Yukiko sighed. She knew her sis was kidding by the end. Most probably she didn't know much about how to ask such a thing. Still, she appreciated the help. She liked Deku. Not in the romantic sense of the movies her brother saw when he thought she wasn't looking. No, it was different. She felt like she could actually have a friend in Deku. One that wasn't forced by her father, someone who wasn't an arranged marriage candidate either. Someone who simply thought her quirk was cool and he was kind to her without expecting anything in exchange. That's all. Still, there was the fact that the watchdog around him wouldn't let her get close. Kacchan. Her name seemed to be Katsuki, but Deku called her Kacchan, meaning those two were close. And judging from what she knew, she was the watchdog who never let anything happen to what it was told to keep safe. And sadly that meant chatting with him wouldn't be so easy. Or rather it could be. They would, after all, have a class on rescue coming soon according to their teacher. Aizawa had been clear on it. Maybe they could have a chance to chat. How hard could it be to have a nice chat? Surely they would be able to have a small chat and try to make a friendship between them bloom. Is not like something bad could happen, right? After all, it would be a controlled stage in UA. It seemed that the Soul Universe sometimes conspired against the chance to chat with Izuku. Katsuki and Yukiko had ended up getting together in the landslide section of the rescue area. They had little to no trouble getting rid of all of them. A loud explosion of Katsuki and a freezing wave from Yukiko, and all of them were trapped. She had made clear her intentions to the villains who were frozen that either they started talking or they would end up getting hypothermia thanks to her quirk. Katsuki found herself impressed at the cold look she had as she spoke. She wondered if this was the same girl she saw looking kindly at Izuku. Soon they spoke and mayhem occurred. Needless to say, everyone didn't know was harder to believe. The fact they had been attacked by villains, or the fact they managed to make it through without a loss thanks to All Might and the teachers who came when Ida managed to run and call for them. It had been something different. Todoroki knew she was expected to fight villains. She didn't expect to be in such a scenario. She had felt confident. She didn't need to use her left side at all. With her quirk she managed to beat everyone with her ice. Proof that she didn't need his quirk. Katsuki simply was surprised at the number of thugs they had managed to get. She noticed they didn't seem to have quirks ready for combat, and what's more, they didn't seem to be suited to fight them. As if they were simply a distraction. Maybe they were. Seeing All Might fight so close was something different. A smile came to her face as she thought of it. One day Izuku would be able to fight the same as All Might. No, that was wrong. He would fight in his own way, but with the strength that All Might uses. The thought of it managed to make her smile. Needless to say, Katsuki had a lot of free time. Following the fight in the rescue zone, the headmaster Nedzu had ordered a free week for the students to relax. Katsuki wanted to visit Izuku and see how he was healing. It seemed he had hurt himself a bit. Nothing as serious as the zero-pointer, but still he got hurt. And normally she would have gone to see Izuku. But she wasn't with him due to the girls in the class wanting to get out together. Spend some time just going around stores and seeing a movie. Honestly, she wasn't interested. She would have rather used the time training and spending it with Izuku, but her mother insisted she should make friends. And before she could make a rebuttal, her mother kindly had already called Ochako saying she would go out with them. Ochako was happy. And sadly, she didn't feel like she should ditch her. If they asked her, she would deny it. She would end up killing whoever voiced her thoughts. But she sort of thought Ochako was okay as a friend. Therefore, she found her first day of relaxation in the mall, in the company of Ochako, and the not-so-good company of Todoroki. She was impressed with Ochako. The girl simply seemed to be able to make friends without any trouble. And in her ability to make friends with everyone, she ended up inviting Todoroki with them. The rest of her class was okay. The pink girl with horns, Mina Ishido, was similar to Ochako. Yazurozu was interesting and obviously seemed different in a way she wasn't sure of. She didn't had anything against it. It just was obvious something was there. Tsuyu was straightforward when speaking. She liked that, she could work with that. She had to admit she was enjoying the simply walking around, window shopping, just going around. Moreover, it was getting her crazy. She preferred her time with Izuku. They would go get something to eat, visit a few stores with manga and All Might figurines and chat of anything they thought of. But she guessed this was going to be different. They weren't Izuku. She had a sadistic fulfillment in seeing Todoroki was having it as hard as her if her discomfort was anything to go by. Ochako's voice broke her thoughts. Todoroki, I just noticed, you dress similar to Kacchan. A few thoughts rushed to Katsuki. First, she had to explain to Ochako she could not go around calling her Kacchan. Kacchan was the way only Izuku and sometimes her mother called her. And the second one was that it was true. Ochako's statement was true. She often dressed in pants and t-shirts. They were more comfortable than dresses and skirt her mother wished for her to try. In fact, she doesn't remember a single photo in which she doesn't wear pants. They were more comfortable to her than skirts. And it seemed Todoroki shared the feeling. She was wearing pants and a long-sleeved shirt. It wasn't what one call feminine. But it showed she seemed to share her thoughts. She spoke to Ochako. I simply prefer dressing like this, dresses aren't my thing. And they weren't. Her father constantly spoke how she should have someone to earn more popularity, to take into account how Kamui Woods and Mountain Lady were a couple for mediatic purposes. She didn't share the thought. And if that was true, then it was saddening to believe other heroes acted like her father in the quest for more popularity. But she hated the dresses. Because they were meant for her to use them and try to get together with a hero whom her father approved of. She wouldn't let herself fall in such a marriage. She unconsciously touched the scar in her face. I just don't like them, they are not my thing. The girls nodded. But the mood had shifted obviously. Though Katsuki hadn't been forced to come out of her home and not spend time with Izuku to end up in such a situation. What are we all waiting for? I came here to eat. So let's go get something. Her loud attitude broke the heavy mood and everyone ended up nodding and walking behind her. Ochako came close to her and whispered at her quickly. That was really nice of you, Kacchan. Said girl simply snorted before she kept walking forward. I don't know what you mean, I am hungry and that's all. So don't leave me waiting, all of you. Ochako found herself smiling. She had the feeling Katsuki wasn't the type to admit she could be nice. If anything, that small act of kindness in taking the conversation away of Todoroki proved she was nice. Deep down, really deep inside the loudness and foul-mouthed attitude, was a nice girl. They ended up simply eating hamburgers. Afterward they said they would go see a movie. Katsuki lied to them saying she had already seen it. It's not she didn't want to spend time with them, but she really wanted to go visit the bookshop and get a manga for Izuku. Maybe one for herself if she was lucky. You could never have enough of the Fist of the North Star. She wished sometimes that her quirk could cause such explosions. But well, she could cause explosions. Just not the same type. Small victories, she guessed. To her surprise, she ended up noticing Todoroki was following her in the mall. She took it as simply walking in the same direction. After the exit to the mall was near the bookshop. When she entered and saw Todoroki behind her, she knew she wasn't simply walking behind her. She still didn't stop herself of checking out the manga section. Only to see Todoroki now staring at her. She had enough. Not that she had a long patience to begin with. What do you want? She threatened at the girl who looked at her with an expression that showed nothing. No fear, nor intimidation. Simple disinterest. Do you have Midoriya address? The question made her temper rise. What's that to you? Todoroki simply kept her question. Do you? At this Katsuki groaned before answering. I do, but I am not telling you. At this the owner of the bookshop approached her and told her to keep quiet. She wished to tell him to go die, but she remembered that would get her thrown out. So embarrassedly she nodded. Could you give me his address? Katsuki kept her calm. Motivated by the wish to buy a manga for Izuku and one for herself. No, I am not. She took the manga she was reading, but before she could move away, Todoroki got in front of her. If you don't help me, I will tell Ochako you ditched them. I know you didn't see the movie. Katsuki looked at her with anger before crossing her arms, stopping herself of exploding. Literally. How do you know that I lied? Todoroki smiled. A smile that was showing how smug she felt about it. But didn't I do now? Katsuki wanted to blast her off. That trick was something Izuku often did to catch her off guard whenever they were chatting. He always knew she wasn't one to lie. Moreover, while Ochako might not feel bad about it, she didn't want to imagine her face slightly losing her usual smile at knowing she had ditched her and the rest of the girls. Katsuki opened her palm in front of Todoroki. You better not tell Ochako. If I learnt that she knows, I am not joking, you are going to die. The fact she hadn't shouted those words are what made Todoroki understand how serious she was. She nodded. She motioned for her to follow her. She paid for the manga and left. Todoroki walked with her and simply asked, You are not going to tell me where he lives? Katsuki, now free of having to stay silent in the bookshop, answered back as loud as ever. As if, I don't trust you alone with Deku. I am taking you there to fulfill my part of this deal. But I am not letting you alone with him, so get ready, Icicle, I will be your chaperone for the day. Katsuki wasn't worried. She would take Todoroki to see Midoriya. Then in the home of her soon-to-be husband, her mother-in-law would look at Todoroki and deny her the entry. She would never allow an enemy to enter her home. That's the exact reason why she could only scream one thing inside her mind when Inko Midoriya opened the door for both girls and offered them something to drink and a slice of cake she had bought for Deku. Mother-in-law, how could you do this? Traitor. Inko sheepishly bowed at Katsuki, understanding the reason the girl was glaring at her. While Inko was sitting, she took on the look of the girl in front of her. White hair and red, and a scar on what she thought was a beautiful face. She smiled at her. So you are a friend of Izuku? The girl seemed to be stunned at the kindness she was being given. I hope he is nice. Inko found herself surprised at the wall she was seeing. It was obvious Todoroki wasn't a people person. She guessed it had to do with her scar. Still, she smiled at her. Izuku is a nice boy for sure. Did you know Katsuki wants to marry him? She said it trying to make her laugh. Instead, she was met with the same serious face from Todoroki. Still, she did got a reaction of Katsuki, who looked proud of herself. Indeed. I am going to marry him, so hands away of Izuku. Said boy had just arrived back from his exercise, and had a look between tiredness and embarrassment at the loud proclamation. Hello Kacchan. His stutter was a result of the exercise more than of the embarrassment. He was almost used at hearing the marriage proclamation by now. Almost being the key word, as there was no simple way to get used to such a thing. It was then he took notice of a third presence in his home. Todoroki was there. Todoroki, what are you doing here? He was fearing she wanted revenge against Kacchan and his mother had intervened. Instead, he found himself surprised at what he heard. I came to check on you. I thought you were hurt by the incident. At this, Izuku blinked but nodded in thanks. I am actually well. Thanks for checking, Todoroki. I honestly didn't know you and Kacchan were friends. Izuku spoke with a smile on his face as his eyes closed in a mix of happiness and soreness. The exercise had been good, but it had also showed how actually tired he was about their previous experience. Still, the smile on his face came naturally at knowing Katsuki was making friends. Izuku, you should take a bath. The words of his mother took him out of his trance, and as he nodded and excused himself, he took the stairs for the bath. At this, Inko Midoriya had to stand up and stay in the front of the stairs. Yukiko Todoroki couldn't understand why she had the need of moving from her place. Until she heard Bakuga groan. Come on. What is so wrong in me taking a bath with him? Inko looked at her with a smile, but it was obvious she would not relent. Sorry, Katsuki, but I insist that boys and girls can't share a bath together, even less two teenagers. Before she could speak up, Inko pointed to the kitchen. Why not take another slice of cake? Is too much for me and Izuku, but with 4 people here that cake will be well shared. Katsuki wanted to groan, but she only moved towards the kitchen. Todoroki found herself following the girl with a short temper. In the kitchen she spoke. She is nice. At this Katsuki simply glared at her. Don't get used to it. Mother-in-law is under my protection, just like Deku. So hands off from them. Todoroki knew she was being honest. Therefore she did the same. I only plan to make friends with Izuku. Nothing more, nothing less. I don't plan to go around playing house like you. I will be the #1 hero. While the intent behind the comment was to anger Bakugo, said girl simply held a smug smile in place as she walked away from the kitchen with 2 dishes of cake. One for her, and one for Izuku. And yet, I managed to beat you, even though in your words I am just playing house. Doesn't that mean you are simply not good enough? She left the kitchen. And the only reason Todoroki didn't make the whole place a field of ice was that she suspected Inko Midoriya wouldn't appreciate her house becoming an ice field. Even more, she doubted Izuku would want to be friends with someone who just came to his home and brought a mess. She would simply have to wait for a chance to fight Katsuki Bakugo and encase her in ice. Surely the chance would come. To say that Izuku wasn't used to Katsuki presence would be an understatement. He knew her perfectly, up to the point he could probably almost have a 6th danger sense that told him she was coming for him. Not that he could run away from her though, that was an impossible quest. He had tried it one time. He thought he had been smart by visiting the marketplace in the city. To his surprise, he found a casual Kacchan holding an ice cream cone for him. Finally! I was worried this would melt before you got here. I got your favorite. That experience just proved him how impossible it was to run away from her. Yet here he was again trying to run from her. In his own room. His own small room, barely going around the bed thinking that maybe he could just jump away through the window. His mom would get angry about the window. However, consequences be damned. Come on. Is nothing so big. I just want you to come with me to buy clothes. The rest PRD was still going. It was their 3rd day free. She had already lost the first one with the girls and the second one training by herself. Therefore, she hoped to spend some time with Deku. Come on, Deku. She lunged through the bed and managed to tackle him before he could reach for the window. She knew he was going to try to jump through the window. In the tackling she managed to not only stop him from reaching the window, but also got him in her arms, which was always a plus. Kacchan. Izuku's face turned red due to the position they were in. It was a rather NTMT hug with 0 distance between them. The small distance was only because her chest was touching his arm. No. I want to spend time with you, you already rested enough. Truth was he didn't minded spending time with her. However, he knew buying clothes for Kacchan would end up being called a date by her the whole time. Moreover, she would probably try to tease him like before. He could only survive a little teasing. He didn't need a whole day of teasing. Yet, she already captured him. So no way out. Therefore, he had to accept defeat. Okay, but no teasing. See, could you let me go? Kacchan smiled as she let herself lean closer to him as she softly spoke. No. Izuku sighed and closed his eyes. So he smiled. It was always nice to feel how much she cared for him. Kacchan, why you are a great friend. He smiled while in embarrassment. The girl who had her iron grip around him smiled, and yet her eyes held a certain sadness. Being friends was good. Nevertheless, she wanted something a bit more selfish. She hoped for the title of girlfriend. Todoroki was having a bad day. First, the so-called father she had. Endeavor had brought news that she was going to find her soon a great candidate for a marriage proposal. He said it would be perfect for her. A strong boy who could surely help her and make them both look great to the media, earning her more attention. And the worst part, her favorite shirt had a hole in it, one too big to try herself to sew back. Moreover, one that even Fuyumi would have trouble fixing. The washing machine had seemingly kept a small piece of the fabric, and the wash did the rest to increase the size of the hole. Now she had to go looking for a new shirt. It would be hard to get a shirt she liked. She liked shirts that boys got. She liked the freedom of movement and the sort of message that said she was no doll for her parent to try to marry off. She was walking through the commercial center, seeing small stores, hoping to find one that had something on her style. If it had red and white colors that would look well. Maybe something in black? When she entered a small store with lots of designs shirts, she found one she particularly liked. A skull with 3 pairs of wings. Metal details were in it and made it look simply cool and stylish. When she grabbed the shirt, she found herself feeling resistance. She was about to apologize to the other person trying to grab the shirt. She could find another one. Nevertheless, when she took in the fact of who was trying to take the shirt, she placed more resistance. Cold hands, should have guessed my day was going too good. Kacchan. Katsuki looked angry at the fact she called her by the nickname that Izuku and Ochako called her. Look just. Katsuki sighed, looking at the shirt before letting it go. Have it. You are not ruining my date. I am not letting it go bad by a shirt. She was surprised at the fact the explosive girl relented. Even more surprised at the fact said girl seemed to be on a date. Who on their right mind would risk taking the explosive girl on a date? Kacchan? Did you got the shirt you were looking for? It was then that she saw him. Izuku Midoriya. The boy was in casual clothes, blue pants and a white shirt. So he was the date of the explosive girl. She noticed how he looked at her and waved at her, albeit a little nervous. Hello Todoroki. You are also buying clothes? Buying clothes? Didn't she say she was in a date? Being as cold and blunt as she usually was, she spoke to Katsuki. I thought you were in a date. At this, she looked angry while Izuki sighed. Both speaking at the same time. I am in a date. We came looking for clothes. Katsuki looked at Izuku, who only shrugged. She was forced to speak again. I came to get some shirts. Deku is coming with me because I wanted to spend time with him. So why are you here? Todoroki kept her face cold and impassive as she looked at Izuku, seemingly speaking to him instead to Katsuki. I came to get a new shirt. My favorite shirt got ripped. Izuku nodded, albeit embarrassedly. He was still getting used in speaking to girls. Moreover, the aura that Yukiko Todoroki had always managed to make him feel embarrassed. He wanted to believe it wasn't because he found her pretty. He also found Kacchan pretty. Katsuki groaned and went to get Izuku. Let's go, Deku. We can find another store. As Izuku nodded and waved to Todoroki, he noticed how she seemed to be walking close to them carrying the shirt of before. Katsuki noticed this too. Why are you following us, cold hands? If the nickname bothered her, she decided not to show it. She kept walking. I am paying for the shirt. The cashier is near the exit. Also, I was hoping to invite Izuku to get an ice cream. After all, you two are not on a date. The phrase had a couple of effects. The first to make Izuku embarrassed. The second to make Katsuki angry. But before she could say anything, she felt him holding her hand. Deku. He smiled at Katsuki before looking at Todoroki. We could use an ice cream. We are all partners, right? Todoroki nodded. She smiled before speaking. Of course is okay. Once she paid for her shirt, Izuku offered to carry the bag for her. She accepted. Meanwhile, Katsuki was internally groaning. She knew Deku was a true gentleman. Mother-in-law had done a great job teaching him manners. Moreover, if he was a hero in his heart was because of that woman who had done all for him. Yet that was being counteractive right now. She wanted to spend time with him alone. And now they were going with Yukiko Todoroki. What's more, he was carrying her bags. Curse him for being so nice. Yet she couldn't curse Deku. But she could totally make an explosion in front of the face of Todoroki. Yukiko Todoroki was not doing any better than Katsuki. She had invited Izuku just to spite Katsuki. To bother her a bit before going away. She didn't expect Izuku to accept the idea of going for ice cream. Nor did she expect him to take Katsuki with them. Why did he accept, to begin with? Why accept the idea? They didn't know much about each other. Sure, she wanted to know more of him because she was curious. He was kind, and he didn't look at her with fear or, well, anything other than seemingly warm feelings. She wanted to make friends with him. Well, she could only hope that things would go well. That was too much to ask for her. As they went into a small store that sold ice creams, Katsuki immediately asked for a big order that was meant for couples. When the order arrived, she didn't feel much to order. She was only hoping to ask Izuku some questions. Now they were all sitting in a table with a bunch of ice cream in the middle. Plus she had offered to invite Izuku. She was going to pay for the behemoth of ice cream that Katsuki ordered. She could always tell them to pay for it themselves. However, she was going to go on her word. She had invited Izuku after all. Todoroki? You aren't having some? She was surprised to hear that the voice that said that wasn't Izuku's gentle voice. It was Katsuki's voice with no malice in it. Simple curiosity. She looked at the spoon she was being offered. She couldn't get it. I mean, this is a bunch of ice cream, is not meant for couples at all, so I thought it was a good idea to order this. Between the three of us we can eat it and pay it apart so is not too expensive. Todoroki didn't understand. Izuku did. Katsuki was by no means someone who used others. And while she was obviously still bothered at the fact Todoroki had gotten with them today, she was not going to let that make her act rude. Plus, she liked the idea of buying things at a cheaper price. Kacchan and I won't be able to eat the whole thing. I mean, unless you don't want to? She made a wave denying the claim and accepted the spoon with one small thanks. They ate in amicable silence. Maybe the day had started in a wrong foot for Yukiko Todoroki. But she had to admit, the feeling of sharing something with a boy who saw her as if she was someone normal was nice. Plus, she had to admit it, she was actually enjoying Katsuki's company too. She didn't have many friends. Scratch that. She had no friends really. Katsuki and Izuku were the closest things to friends she had. Was that sad? A bit. But she didn't care. She was happy. Izuku was meanwhile whispering at Katsuki. Kacchan. Are you seeing it? Said girl nodded. Yeah, hard to believe she can smile Deku. Izuku sighed at the comment. But he nodded. Both were noticing how Todoroki's expression changed the whole time. She was looking less gloomy, less serious, she looked happy. A soft smile adorned her face. She looks really pretty when she smiles, like you Kacchan. At this both Katsuki and Todoroki stopped eating. Izuku had not whispered that part. Needless to say, the road to the station was filled with apologies from Izuku and a Katsuki who said she didn't want to hear it. As Izuku sighed, he took a small detour to a drink machine. He would get her something. Meanwhile, as he was in his detour, Todoroki took the chance to speak with Katsuki. Katsuki, I said something rude to you last time. I apologize. The explosive girl was taken by surprise at the bow of the other, and she waved her away. Don't worry. I could care less about that, just don't speak about Deku and me like that. I am serious with him. She smiled, proud of admitting how much she liked Izuku, the best friend she had. Todoroki nodded. And she offered a hand at Katsuki. I want to make this clear with you. I am interested in him. And since you two are not dating, I plan to give it a try myself. I will not only be the #1 hero. I am also making Izuku fall for me. At this, Katsuki was angry. But at the same time, she was smiling. She hated people who double-crossed others, people who hid their true intentions. So she loved those who were not afraid of making their intentions clear. She took Yukiko's hand in a firm grip. I accept your challenge, I will be the #1 hero, and if you think you can make Izuku fall for you, I dare you to try. She smiled. She would not let Deku get away. And if Yukiko thought she could beat her, she was welcoming to it. Try your best, Yukiko. Said girl smiled and nodded, fixing a strand of her long hair behind her ear. You too, Katsuki. At the end of this scene of the camaraderie of two girls who had just declared a challenge to the other, Izuku had arrived with a drink for everyone. It's good to see you two acting like friends. He smiled at them. What he was not expecting was how Yukiko kissed his cheek before running to a train. Take care, Deku. She screamed as she got into her train. Two reactions happened. Izuku simply let out a confused sound at the kiss to his cheek. Meanwhile, Katsuki was running as fast as she could to the train of Yukiko, shouting at her. Yukiko! The girl on the train was sure of something. She was feeling much better now than at the beginning of her day. They often say animals have a sixth sense of natural disasters, how others seem to be able to feel the danger. How others can feel sickness or incoming changes. The same way nature has given animals the innate ability for this. Nature had given Izuku Midoriya the innate ability to know when Katsuki Bakugo was at her boiling point. He had tried to avoid the issue. However, he knew there was no running away. Plus, his mom had betrayed him by trapping him in a hug as she cried in happiness. My Izuku is growing, said the pleasant voice of his mother. She was happy and hugging him, inadvertently keeping him safe from the fury of Katsuki. That's not the point. A girl just kissed your son in the cheek. A girl whom you have not approved of. Katsuki was holding her hands together in a tight grip, forcing herself to not hit or explode anything. Izuku thought this was the equivalent of a crocodile refusing to open his jaw. He could not maul anyone if its jaw was close. But nature ordered for him to open it. And he knew Katsuki would need to blow out some steam after this. His mother kept gushing on how he was growing. So deciding he would need to face the ox by the horns, he spoke. We are free tomorrow still. Why don't we have a spar tomorrow at the beach? The words did their desired effect on the target. Katsuki's hands broke out of their grip, only to close again, this time in a praying manner. You mean it? We haven't sparred in a while. She was smiling in glee. And he found himself nodding at her. The explosive girl shouted in victory, saying they needed a slice of cake to celebrate. Izuku and Katsuki had spars, mostly to never lose practice. But this would be their first spar with both. Having quirks. She always used her while sparring with him. But his training was more focused on evading and exploiting weaknesses. Therefore, this would be an interesting spar for both of them. The fourth day of their free week started by meeting in the beach where All Might had helped Izuku train. They decided the place would be a good spot to spar. Plus, Kacchan insisted that it wouldn't be a good idea to go to their usual spot. Mostly cause she thought it would be dangerous with the tall grass this season. They didn't need a second reprimand of the firefighters. So they met and looked at the other. Katsuki had her short hair out of her face and looking ready. Izuku was wearing his gym uniform, stretching and looking at her. She had her usual wild smile. Well, you know the rules, Deku. First to fall down 3 times loses. No poking the eyes, no kick to the groin, and the winner gets a kiss from the loser. The last part took Izuku by surprise. I don't remember that being part of our usual rules, Kacchan. She smiled at him. Izuku would be lying if he didn't say he found her smile cute. I know. But you got a quirk now, so I had to change the rules. He didn't point out that the new rule didn't have anything to do with quirks. So he simply nodded at her and got ready. The spar was simple. Make the other fall 3 times. In the past, Izuku would manage this by making her lose her footing or catching her arm when she motioned for an explosion. So far, the score between them was 117 to 116. However, who was keeping count? Both of them actually. As usual, they would start counting in unison. 3, 3, 2, 2, 1, 1, die, go. They rushed towards the other, Izuku running and sliding to the right of Katsuki. Meanwhile, she expected that, so she made an explosion to push herself to the right. In the momentum of the explosion, she positioned herself in front, managing to catch Izuku, spin him around and make him fall in the sand. First blood goes to me. Izuku found himself laughing. That it does, Kacchan. As he stood up, he rushed forward, catching her off guard, managing to take her legs for a takedown, making her fall in the sand. But you forgot that the spar is still going. He smiled at her, then proceeded to back away so she could stand. She smiled wildly. Oh, Deku's so mighty. Time to fall again. She rushed forward with an explosion behind her to catch him. Izuku, knowing this move, simply made a jump for the left while going towards her, knowing she wouldn't maneuver quick enough. Izuku knew Kacchan had a particular problem. Her movement was as a vector, meaning she was great moving in straight lines, but circular motions were not easy to pull out with her quirk. She needed to maneuver with her explosions, and that wasn't easy. She was becoming better, but for now, that was something he could make use. Katsuki found herself making an explosion in front of her to get back to Izuku, but he was ready, and the moment she was about to release the explosion, she felt the hands of Izuku guiding her towards the ground. Izuku noticed there was a small, hover PRD, in which Katsuki was in the air with no energy or explosive momentum, so she could just be guided to the floor. Second fall, Kacchan, I might just get the tie. In his own sense of happiness, he failed to follow his own advice and keep his attention on the spar. So when Kacchan got his feet and pulled him, he was not ready and ended up falling directly in his bottom. Well, I dare say someone got cocky. Both smiled to the other as they stood up. They were looking at the other. And Izuku decided to try something. He tried to picture one for all, the energy going through his legs, picturing the energy. The result wasn't what he or Katsuki expected. They understood how all might manage to go from one place to the next so quickly. By increasing the strength of his legs, he could make jumps and sprints that covered big distances. But with loose footing in the beach, the result was Izuku going forward towards the ground, crashing with Katsuki, who was doing her best in keeping him stable. Once the momentum died, they were both in the ground, laughing at the mess of sand they caused. Through the laughs, Katsuki spoke. "Well, I guess this is your win, I fell first." Deku smiled at her, waving her off. "Not at all, you stopped me from going farther, you won." She smiled, hugging him. He hugged her. Their sparrings would usually go that way. A long series of ties and given victories to the other. The kind of sparring out there. Sparring that had been going for long. Between a girl with a quirk and a quirkless boy. Even though the two had quirks now, it had yet to lose its kind nature. The day for Izuku and Katsuki was going in a simple manner. After their spar, they decided they needed to take a bath. Which Inko Midoriya kindly reminded Katsuki only children and married couples could bath together. And she didn't fit that bill. So Katsuki begrudgingly accepted to take a bath after Izuku. Inko had her suspicions at the kindness act. So decided that while Izuku bathed she would make guard in the door. Katsuki stood at the side of the door chatting with her. "So, still no?" Inko smiled, nodding. "No indeed. As I said before, either you get married and live alone. Or no bathing together." She sighed. "We were allowed to take baths together before." Inko chuckled at that statement. It could be misunderstood by many others. You were both children, and it wasn't like you always did it. Katsuki knew she wouldn't budge. "Okay, you win, mother-in-law." Katsuki was silent and Inko actually got worried. She could deal with an angry Katsuki, even a sad or desperate one. Happy too when it happened. But she was not used to such a silent one. "Katsuki, are you all right?" She sighed and nodded. "Yukiko said she is going to try to get Izuku to like her. I am just thinking. Maybe if I took a part-time job and started saving, I could have enough money for an engagement band." Inko Midoriya found herself sighing. It wasn't anything serious. Just Katsuki being herself. "Did you say Yukiko is interested in Izuku?" At this Katsuki nodded, never losing her thinking expression. Inko just found herself surprised. "You are taking it rather well." At this Katsuki looked at Inko before smiling. "I don't need to worry. Izuku loves me and I love him. We have been best friends since ever. Why should I worry about a girl that just appeared? Sure, she has long hair and looks pretty. But come on, mother-in-law. There is no way I am losing." Inko remembered in moments like this how cute Katsuki could be. She was too honest for her own good, and at times that honesty could be seen as a blunt movement. But thing is, she was like that. Simple and honest. No doubt why she was Izuku's best friend. Yukiko Todoroki found herself helping her sister. Mostly in the form of holding the yarn she was working with. So far it had been easy. Chatting with her sister in the end was consistent of mostly listening to what she was saying. The usual routine was for her to ask a question, then her sister would let out all the information she had. So yeah, that's pretty much all I know about hairstyling. Yukiko found herself nodding. It had been an interesting 1-hour chat. Mostly listen, nod, and keep any trivia info for herself. Thinking it might be useful someday. So, enough about me. I heard Dad has been meaning to find you a date again. She found herself flinching. She didn't want to show it affected her. But it did. "I've been chatting with him. He actually asked my opinion. I saw the names of your partners for, This time she couldn't stay silent. "Arranged marriage. You can say it the way it is. He is arranging a marriage so I can be more popular." Heroes fought for popularity. Others didn't. But the truth was, they weren't afraid of playing any card to be the more popular hero. Her father believed it would do wonders for her to be married. To make the world see her as a strong woman who also had time for love. He didn't know a thing for love. Her mother. She didn't want to go there. I couldn't convince him of stopping the whole thing, but I did manage to make all the other options go away. So you will only need to know one candidate. This brought relief to Yukiko. One candidate. That meant she could reject him or freeze him. Moreover, that would put her dad back into looking candidates, which would take time. Did you saw his name? Her sister nodded. Yeah. In fact, he goes to UA. He was the #1 candidate on the entrance exam. His name is Izuku Midoriya. The suddenness of the surprise, the shock in itself, made her release both parts of her quirk in her hands, essentially freezing half of the yarn while the other half got in flames. Yukiko. They often say animals have the ability to sense the danger. Katsuki Bakugo got this sense while bathing. No. I don't know why, but I am greatly angered with Yukiko. Once said girl finished her bath and got dry. She changed clothes. Inko Midoriya knew of the girl Constance's visits. So she thought it would be okay to let the girl have a space for her clothes in the house. This proved to be a good investment, for with this problem solved she got rid of Katsuki intense on using Izuku clothes saying she needed clothes. Thing is, Katsuki hair was still wet, but this was because of a tradition from long ago. She sat in front of Izuku. Dry my hair. She said this excitedly as Izuku accepted the small towel she brought with her. The boy simply laughed before doing as told. It had become a ritual between them, just like sparring. He would help her dry her hair. And she would help him too when the need appeared. Small rituals. Small things that they did every time. Friends that lived pretty much joined by their hips. And yet for Katsuki this wasn't enough. Izuku noticed the lack of comments from his friend. Kacchan? Are you okay? He asked with worry in his voice. Katsuki looked at him and brought him into a hug. He didn't know what was going on. But he guessed the right thing to do was ignore his own blush and just take the hug. I am okay, Deku. I am okay. The next day was just training for Izuku, a hoodie in place and running. He decided to go for a run in the morning. Stamina was an important aspect to build. He honestly had been hoping to spend the day with Kacchan. However, she said she would be doing some training on her own. He suspected whatever was going on was something personal. Therefore, he decided to respect her space. As he kept running through his usual road, he saw something he never saw before. Ice sculptures. Different form, different in sizes, and he saw the ability in them. Todoroki seemingly was training her quirk, it seemed. He decided it was a good chance to learn more about his classmate quirk. As he approached, she noticed Todoroki was wearing her long hair in a ponytail, seemingly keeping her face clear of any distraction. Hey, Todoroki! He waved at her. He thought it would be better to approach her loudly and make his presence known. It was never good to approach someone who was using a quirk without making one known. Accidents could happen. Said girl looked at Izuku, she waved back. And Izuku took notice of the state the girl was at. Frostbite seemed to be around her. He worriedly approached her. Todoroki, are you okay? Said girl nodded and sat on the floor. She breathed before answering. Just training control. She was shivering and Izuku removed the hoodie he was wearing and used to cover the said girl muttered a small thanks. At this Izuku was in thought. Todoroki, your quirk freezes you. If you used your left side, shouldn't it start warming you up? Said girl immediately tensed at the mention of her left side. And spoke in what Izuku thought was anger. I refuse to use his quirk. Izuku saw the shivering girl. He couldn't understand what she meant. I don't know much about you honestly, but I am willing to listen. He sat in the floor next to her. The dirt around him not bothering him in the slightest. He took notice she was seemingly breathing and hugging herself with the hoodie. Trying to warm herself. Izuku sighed before she started to speak again after a long silence. My quirk is the result of the marriage of my mother and Endeavor. Izuku took notice of how she didn't mention Endeavor as her father, but rather as if someone else named someone they disliked. Heard of quirk marriages? Izuku let out a soft yes. He knew of them, everyone knew. Quirk marriages, they came to be around the second generation of quirk users or third. It really changed depending on what source you choose to believe. But the end was the same. They were marriages between people looking to develop a new quirk, hoping their offspring would result in a quirk fusion of both of them. People started to look for candidates. People with strong quirks looked for people with flexible quirks. Others looked for more powerful quirks. It really was a hard time, especially for the children of such marriages, as when they didn't got the quirk their parents expected. It wasn't pretty. Endeavor married my mother because of her quirk. She made ice, so Izuku got the rest. The perfect combination of such quirks. One that made ice, but seemingly had the disadvantage of freezing the body. Moreover, if his own notes of endeavor were right, a fire quirk that heated the body, forcing him to avoid using flashy moves and focus itself. So a quirk that heats the body, and one that freezes it. Meaning Todoroki having both was essentially a cooling system. She could freeze her body and then use her flame quirk to regain her temperature. If she started using flames constantly, she just needed to use her ice quirk to lower it. A quirk marriage that essentially had attained the best result possible. I promised to never use his quirk. Izuku took notice of how she seemingly touched the burn mark in her face. I don't know about your situation. I can't say I understand it, but I believe you are lucky of having both of your parents. This took Yukiko by surprise, who placed her focus at Izuku. My mom has always taken care of me, and she is the best. He spoke in glee that turned sour after a few moments. But she has always been forced to do her best. I don't know anything about my dad. Mom speaks about him. Nevertheless, I have never seen him. I haven't seen a photo of the three of us. Izuku sighed. My mom married my dad because she said they were in love. But was my dad love so fickle he abandoned us just like that? He looked at the sculptures of ice around them. Works of art made by Yukiko. I didn't even have his quirk. I can't say I have something of my dad. You have the best of your mom and of your dad. He smiled, then looking at her, remembering those same words he was told before. A young Izuku was saddened. And his sadness was met with a loud explosion in front of his face made from a girl who didn't like seeing him sad. So, what if your dad is not with you, Deku? You already have the best of your mom and of your dad. Don't go taking on the worst of them. You already have the best of them. Do not take on the worst of them. Maybe you are the result of a quirk marriage. But you are your own person. You are not Endeavor. You are not your mother. You are Yukiko Todoroki. Said girl eyes were fully open, absorbing what she just heard. She wasn't Endeavor. She wasn't her mother. She was her own person. Her own person. With her own unique quirk. It wasn't Endeavor. It wasn't her mother quirk either. It was hers. She stood up, removing the hoodie and giving it at Izuku. Said boy was looking with surprise in his eyes at how the girl seemed to have steel in her eyes as she suddenly breathed and started making an ice sculpture. This one without the detail of the others. It was rowdy. It looked ugly. It was a badly done ice sculpture of Endeavor. She looked at it and then at Izuku. Please, come behind me, this could accidentally hurt you. Izuku didn't question her and stood up, the hoodie in tow as he positioned himself behind Yukiko. The girl breathed and Izuku saw her left arm flare to life. Then it seemingly followed as her hair too lit on fire. Only the half. The red half of her hair. Izuku took notice of how the signs of frostbite on her seemingly were gone. Then without a warning, a small blast of fire was launched from her hand, blowing the Endeavor figure in pieces. Take that! She shouted in glee, in happiness at the destruction of the figure. So happy that she found herself embarrassed at the fact she remembered she was not alone. She looked embarrassedly at Izuku, her embarrassment turning into a blush seeing the amazement in his eyes. That was amazing. You can actually get your temperature back in place. There is no more frostbite and… Yukiko was surprised. He kept rambling on her quirk. There was no disdain. No nothing. Only fun and amazement. She found herself doing something she didn't remember doing maybe since she was a child. She started laughing. A soft laugh that turned into a loud laugh. She couldn't really remember laughing like this before. But she couldn't stop, and she kept going until tears started coming out of her eyes at the happiness she was feeling. Izuku rambling stopped. And while he couldn't understand what was so funny, he was happy of seeing Yukiko being so relaxed. After a while, both students decided to part ways. Yukiko had to go back home. And Izuku still wanted to see Kacchan. Yukiko seemed to frown a bit at the mention of his friend. Still they parted ways with the promise of seeing each other again in school. And with a second promise in it too. She would use her flame quirk more. She would use it. But she would practice in secret. Away from the eyes of her father. She had fun destroying the sculpture. She would make more of them to practice. Meanwhile Izuku found himself knocking the door of a house he knew well. He was received with a smile from the woman in the door. "Ah, Izuku. Looking for Kacchan?" He nodded and she motioned for her room. Izuku not noticing her mischievous smile. "She is right there, you know the path." He thanked her and walked to the room without knocking. He knew the routine: if the door was closed, knock. If it was slightly open, don't knock. He found himself surprised at seeing his friend struggling with a brush and her hair. "Stay down, damn it." When said girl noticed the door opening, she spoke without looking in the direction. "Not now, old hag. I can do this alone." The cough of Izuku made her look. Her eyes as if she was a deer caught in the lights of a vehicle. "Deku! Kacchan!" Both were in a standstill. Before she rushed forward trying to close the door only to see how Izuku simply walked forward stopping the door. "You saw nothing, you hear me? You saw nothing, Deku." He found himself chuckling entering the room. He took notice of the usual stuff of Kacchan lying around. Video games, magazines, school material. The usual stuff lying around her room that, while not exactly in order, wasn't messy either. What surprised him was to see the styling products and the brushes lying around. He recognized that as stuff that she didn't use at all. Mostly cause he knew her room. "I was trying something new," she said dejectedly at being caught. However, Izuku knew the right way to cheer her. "Wanna play something? We got time, plus, I would like to spend the day with you, Kacchan." Said girl smirked, her smile turning wild and any feelings of shame and embarrassment gone through the window. "Oh, someone is feeling brave? Believe you can actually win this time?" He smiled back at her with a nod. "I know I can win." She laughed loudly before bringing out the controllers. A game turning on. Maybe he didn't know what was going on with Kacchan. Maybe he didn't really understand the pain of Yukiko. That wasn't going to stop him of trying. To keep being better. And to keep being a better friend for them. To be the sort of friend that brought smiles with him. When Izuku saw documentaries of animal life, he always found himself jealous of their ability to feel danger and avoid situations in which their life was at risk. He was jealous of that ability to just know what was good to avoid and what they could fight. Humans needed to rely on their common sense, and this really didn't work most of the time. For example, right now, his common sense said going out with Katsuki to the park to enjoy their last day of rest was a good idea. But he also knew that Yukiko could be in that place, seeing as the park wasn't that far from when he saw her train. But if he told Katsuki that he had been with Yukiko before going to her home, he would be trying too hard to keep her out of fighting Yukiko. But if he didn't say it, they could see Yukiko, and both would want to fight again. Whatever the case, there was a storm looming in the horizon. And he was but a poor sailor in a raft, and his coconut friend had already abandoned the ship in order to play his chances in the sea. Yeah, he was in trouble. Katsuki was happy. Izuku was with her holding hands, walking to the park they used to spend time before. It was a beautiful day too. No people in sight at the park, just the three of them. Three? Oh no. She wouldn't. When Katsuki heard the girl say her name and Izuku, she knew it wasn't a mirage. But a solid human with long hair of two colors and dressed in a t-shirt from a metal band and jeans. Yukiko Todoroki was waving at them as she was in a bench with a book. Katsuki would have really enjoyed the fact she and Yukiko liked the same metal band if it wasn't because she was her competition for the love of Izuku. Which, speaking of, she was holding his hand rather tightly. Izuku just sighed as he had expected this possible scenario. With his free hand he waved at Yukiko, who smiled. She patted the spot next to her in the bench. "You can sit here, Katsuki, you are welcome to Izuku." Katsuki wanted to be angry, but she remembered she promised herself to not fall for provocations. So she did as told and sat. The pair was next to Yukiko, who looked extremely happy for a change. It actually managed to pique the curiosity of the pair. "You look happy, did something happen?" Yukiko nodded, a small smile in her face. "I am just happy of having a free day without my dad." For Yukiko, any day she didn't need to see Endeavor was a good day. Izuku nodded and Katsuki did too. She looked at a small sandbox in the park and took notice of something moving far from it. As if someone was looking at them. "Oi, Yukiko, how long you been in the park?" She spoke with real curiosity, her eyes looking far away. Yukiko closed her book slowly, looking at the same spot. "An hour at most, and she wasn't there for sure." Izuku heard these words and focused on the spot they were looking at. A blonde girl in a sailor uniform was looking at them. Her head was barely poking out of the tree behind the sandbox, but it was noticeable she was looking at them. What really caught the attention of the group was the girl bloodied hands and a knife. While Yukiko and Katsuki found the girl to be dangerous, Izuku walked towards her quickly. Neither Yukiko or Katsuki had a chance to tell him to stop when he reached the girl. When Izuku was worried he could be really fast. He quickly took the hands of the girl. "Are you okay? Did you cut yourself? What happened?" The girl didn't have time to reach when her hands were taken by the boy, nor did she had a chance to react when he pulled her close to a faucet of water to clean her hands. While Yukiko was confused at this, Katsuki could only sigh and curse under breath the fact that Izuku had the need to help everyone. As he cleaned the girl's hands, said girl smiled, looking with curiosity at Izuku. Did he not see the knife she was holding? Did he not care she had blood in her clothes? Her question was answered when the boy brought out a handkerchief of the pocket of his pants. "It may not really work, but you can try to clean your clothes with this." The girl took the handkerchief slowly. She dropped the knife to the floor and took the handkerchief to clean her clothes. While it didn't really take all of it out, it helped. And she found herself taking the handkerchief. "Mind if I clean it and then give it to you?" she asked with a smile in her face. Izuku took notice her face seemed to have a continual blush in it. She had a pretty face. "Sure." He smiled as the girl offered her hand to him. "Himiko Toga." Izuku smiled as he took her hand. "Izuku Midoriya." She nodded and proceeded to go away, not speaking anymore, as she didn't want to risk making a bad impression in the boy. She just left and waved. While Izuku looked behind, he saw a said Katsuki held in place by a block of ice. "Why are you trapped in ice?" Katsuki groaned as Yukiko spoke. "She told me to make sure she didn't do anything stupid. This is the best I could think of." Katsuki groaned before looking at Yukiko. "You enjoy this, don't you?" Yukiko smiled while nodding. "It would be a lie if I said I don't find your situation funny." As both kept bickering, Izuku was smiling at seeing the two girls were starting to be friendly to each other. His obliviousness at them was as huge as the power he had inside of him. School started again. The whole deal with the villains was the talk of the school. Izuku didn't really focus on that, but on the other theme going around the school, the festival was approaching. They would need to train and be on their best game to prove they had what it took to be the best. Needless to say, Katsuki was ready. Or she considered she was ready. Izuku meanwhile had yet to master the way All Might move. He still needed to find a way to make those bursts of strength in his legs to work as a way to make it become speed. Yukiko was also spending more time with both of them. Izuku took notice that she was often walking next to him and Katsuki. While this seemed to bother Katsuki a bit, she was also learning to get with her. Of course, the three of them were adapting. For one side, Yukiko was obviously intending to spend more time with Izuku. On the other, Katsuki now had to worry of a girl who had an interest in Izuku romantically. And Izuku himself was trying to learn how to survive the storm that happened between the two girls fighting for the #1 spot in the class and in the school. Izuku was really not getting the fact both girls were constantly fighting because they were fighting for his feelings. Aizawa had decided it was time for them to try something new. Today you will be working together with a classmate in a simple exercise. Knowing each other. The class looked at Aizawa, who spoke of it nonchalantly as if it was hard. Some of you know nothing about each other and others are exactly the opposite. He pointed at Kaminari and Izuku. You two don't know much of each other, and in the opposite sense, I believe Midoriya knows everything there is to know about Bakugo. Katsuki smiled proudly, nodding at those words. You don't know when you might work together, so take this time as a chance to learn to meet each other. That goes especially for you two. He pointed to Katsuki and Yukiko. You two better learn of each other in this hour, or I will just fail you too. He closed his sleeping bag and fell on the floor. Izuku found it fun to try it, so he went with Kaminari, who also liked the idea of getting to know his classmate. In no time, everyone had a partner, and Katsuki and Yukiko knew they were the forced pair. They sat in front of each other's using their desks to make a sort of table. Katsuki was the first to break the metaphorical ice. So, name? Shioseki D at it. Yukiko Todoroki. Yours? Both were bad at it, in fact. Katsuki Bakugo. Deku calls me Kacchan. She smiled saying that. Yukiko frowned slightly, knowing the nickname was a result of a deep friendship. Still, she relaxed and asked a question. Quirk. Katsuki chuckled. I make explosions. And you make fire and ice. Can we stop this? We really need to try here. Katsuki had gotten tired of the useless questions in no time at all. What do you want to know? For her luck, so was Yukiko. Why do you like Deku? Straight to the point, she shot her question. Why do you? Yukiko got defensive with another question, but for her bad luck, Katsuki wasn't afraid of sharing her feelings of Deku. I love him because all he is. He is honest, caring, he has known me my whole life and doesn't want to change one thing of me. He has stayed with me through everything, never asking for anything. Why shouldn't I love him? So stop going around the question and answer. Yukiko was surprised at how easily it had been for Katsuki to speak of her feelings. She was jealous. I just do, he is nice. He doesn't look at me as if I was a monster, he just looks at me and sees a person. Nothing different. In his eyes, I am special at the same time I am not. Yukiko wasn't sure if this was something she should speak so openly. But seeing Katsuki speak so openly forced her to do that. Katsuki respected the fact that it was obvious Yukiko had a hard time answering and let her ask the next question. What is your goal? And I mean really, what you hope for your future? Katsuki smiled, looking to the roof for a moment. Looking somewhere far higher. I want to be the #1 hero, be like All Might, and I want to have Izuku by my side all the time. The two of us being the ultimate team. The #1 and the #2 heroes, always changing spots because we will never stop getting over each other, always aiming higher. Yukiko's face showed surprise. Katsuki Bakugo had no fear. She spoke of her goals as if they were the easiest thing in the world. As if no one or anyone could stop her dreams. She didn't seem to think of dangers or having worries. Not as long as Izuku was part of her dreams and goals. What about you, Yukiko? You want the top of the mountain for yourself? Because let me tell you, if you reach the top alone, better get ready to be alone. I doubt anyone wants to stay alone. Even you cold hands, I doubt you want to be lonely. Yukiko found herself looking at her own hands. She was seriously in thought about the last thing Katsuki said. I don't know. I just want to show him I will reach the top by my own means. Katsuki chuckled. So, is not even for yourself? Is because you want to prove something? Yukiko looked angry at Katsuki. But the truth was her anger wasn't at Katsuki. It was against the veracity of her words. She was right. And she hated the fact that Katsuki was right. What should I do? She dared to ask. Surprisingly, Katsuki smiled at her. It was a kind smile. Not one of smug victory, not one of superiority. It was just a nice smile. The smile of someone who wants to help. Try to live for yourself, Yukiko. Do things you want to do. That's what I do. And she wasn't lying. She did all the things she did because she wanted to do them. Her love of Izuku was hers. Her wish to raise to be the #1 with Izuku was hers. Everything Katsuki Bakugo did was because she wanted to do it. Yukiko Todoroki was surprised at the honest advice. And couldn't avoid but question it. But Why do you want to help me? She heard the chuckle of Katsuki as she looked at her. But, because you are my rival too, aren't you? It's not going to be a fair competition if you are not doing your best. I mean, I know Izuku will choose me. But in the end, you declared your intentions, and I am answering with fairness. In reality, Katsuki was nervous about Yukiko. The girl had things she didn't. Still, she refused to believe that would give her an advantage. Izuku and her had grown together. They were friends. They could most surely become a couple. Yukiko wasn't thinking on that but on the words of Katsuki. A smile appeared in her face and Katsuki lightly cursed at how pretty Yukiko Todoroki looked when she smiled. Thank you, Katsuki. She said it and meant it. Katsuki found herself blushing at the earnest answer. You are welcome. As she finished speaking, they heard the sound of Aizawa opening his sleeping bag, saying the class was over. I hope you all learned something from your classmate. I will ask you tomorrow of something you learned. So be sure to write it in a piece of paper what you learned. Both girls nodded at each other and wrote something in paper. Yukiko Todoroki is a nerd. Katsuki Bakugu. Katsuki Bakugu doesn't have a piece of grace. Yukiko Todoroki. A lie. One that might get them into problems. But the thing was, they would not reveal the deepness of what they spoke to their teacher. That was a knowledge that would stay between rivals. A matter of respect, a matter of knowing they could trust the other wouldn't speak. Yukiko Todoroki was interested in Izuku Midoriya. And so was Katsuki Bakugu. They shared that, and that was the reason each would fight with all their strength. Each had earned the other trust. However, there was an event closing by that would put their mettle to the test. The school festival of UA would be coming. And with it a clash of titans. Izuku Midoriya, Katsuki Bakugu, Yukiko Todoroki. The three of them would be fighting for the #1 spot. But two of them would be fighting for something much bigger. They would fight for the love of someone. In the house of the Midoriya family, a certain event was going on. One that would affect the recent build-up trust Katsuki had decided to grace on Yukiko. Greetings, ma'am. Endeavor, the #2 hero, was standing in the door of the home of the Midoriya family. Oh. Endeavor, right? Inko Midoriya knew one thing the moment she saw the man with the fake fire beard. She didn't like him. Inko Midoriya didn't like Endeavor. Why Izuku respected him, she didn't know. But she would still be civil. How can I help you, sir? Enji looked at the smaller woman and spoke. May I enter? Inko smiled. But she didn't nod. Only if you turn off that beard of yours. She pointed to the fire in his face. This made Enji recoil in surprise. Was the woman really asking that? I will have to deny, lady. Inko nodded. Then I guess our conversation will have to be outside. I am afraid the firefighters are not on good terms with me and my constant alarms, so either you turn it off, or we stay outside. She wasn't lying. Many incidents with Katsuki had earned her a hard time with the firefighters. She never held it against Katsuki. The girl just had an explosive temper, but she really liked her, and she always did apologize. Enji Todoroki wasn't having a good day. First he lost the trail of a girl with a dangerous quirk and had been forced to lose the chance to speak with Yukiko about her possible marriage partner, and now a lady was telling him to lose his image if he wanted to enter in her house to speak. At this time, things couldn't go worse even if he wanted. He sighed as he let his quirk relent. Inko nodded and let him get in. Once inside, Inko offered him to sit and he did. He sighed and for the first time Inko saw how human Endeavor was. Without the fire look in his face, he looked rather tired. She reminded her of how she would look during the first days she took care of Izuku alone. Can I offer you tea? She asked with a smile and Enji Todoroki nodded. I would appreciate that, yes. He let a hand over his face and Inko couldn't avoid asking. Did something happen? Enji nodded, letting a sigh out. A lot happened. But that always happens. Inko took notice of something. Without the beard and the brave facade of the hero Endeavor, the man in front of him looked more like a tired parent who didn't know what to do. She had seen that look before. She had seen that look in the mirror many times when her husband went away and she didn't know if she could raise Izuku. You got children, don't you? The question took Enji Todoroki by surprise. Are you a telepath? He raised an eyebrow at her. He didn't like his mind being exposed. This only earned a giggle from Inko Midoriya. No, I am a mother who raised a child alone. I know how hard it is to suddenly have to care for children alone and not knowing what to do. For a moment, Enji Todoroki felt oddly exposed. I don't know how to speak to them. And I don't know how to try it. Whatever I try seems to backfire. In a weird moment of honesty, Enji exposed himself. That's easy. No one knows, and whoever says they know how to care for children is probably lying too. She smiled as she offered him the cup of tea. She kept speaking. Being a parent is hard. We don't know how to raise children. We just hope to do our best. Do you think you have been doing your best? She smiled at the end of those words, remembering when she asked herself that question. Enji Todoroki sighed. No. I don't believe I have. He drank the tea before looking at Inko again. Today I came to speak to you about a marriage proposal between your son and my daughter. Inko noticed there was a but in the middle of that phrase. Yet it may not be the right answer. I just want the best for my children. I thought that if Yukiko were to marry, she would end up having an easier time later when she is a hero. Inko frowned at those thoughts. Do you think so little of your daughter to think she needs to be married to be successful? Enji sighed before denying. No. I think I have hurt that girl so much that she is unable to make proper bonds. This took Inko by surprise. I have asked her to be the best. Always to be better. So that she wasn't like me, the eternal second under All Might, but there is nothing wrong with that, but I am afraid she will end up alone. Inko finished the phrase. Like you? The man tiredly nodded. I thought that if she was married then she would be more popular for the rankings, but then I decided I just wanted her to marry someone who could make her happy. Inko nodded. And you found Izuku? He nodded. I spoke with the teachers. They told me the boy was kind and trustworthy. All Might spoke specially highly about him, so I believed he would surely help Yukiko. Inko nodded. But forcing a marriage is not the answer. If you force your daughter she will only end up hating you. And she would end up disliking Izuku if she believed going with him would be accepting your terms. She would be willing to sabotage her own happiness in order to rebel. Inko now understood more of the girl who had come to her house before. Enji Todoroki nodded. He didn't have an argument good enough to use with the matriarch of the Midoriya house. I can see that now. He stood up, retrieving a picture from his pocket. I also came to warn you. This girl has been seen in the surrounding area. If you see her, call a hero immediately. The picture was of a blonde girl with a sailor uniform. She looks like she is the age of my son. Enji nodded at her words. Indeed. But she is suspected of having harmed and assaulted a couple. I need to interrogate her. If you see her, do call. He stood up and walked towards the door. And what will happen with the marriage proposal? Enji Todoroki stood in the door as he opened it. What marriage proposal? Inko smiled as he was getting. Thank you. Endeavor. The man stopped before lighting his fire again. Enji Todoroki. And I believe I owe you, miss. Inko Midoriya. And you owe me nothing. Just try to speak with your daughter. He nodded. I will. Endeavor left, the tiredness around him fading just a bit. He would go home. Yukiko Todoroki had, in a weird sign of trust, invited Katsuki to her home. Her sister was visiting too. Which would prove to be the mistake of her life. For a word escaped her sister when she asked who Katsuki was. She is Izuku's best friend. Her sister's face showed surprise. Izuku? Izuku Midoriya, the same as in the marriage arrangement. Those words made Katsuki look in surprise at Yukiko. Marriage arrangement? How come she never heard of that? How come no one told her of that arrangement? She looked at Yukiko in anger. She stood up and left the room. Yukiko looked at her sister who held her hands over her mouth as she apologized. Yukiko went running to see Katsuki. The girl looked angry and she knew it was a misunderstanding. Katsuki! Wait! To her surprise she waited. Let me explain. Katsuki turned back with her arms crossed and Yukiko winced. She would have been able to deal with an angry Katsuki, the explosive kind of anger. But seeing the cold face of disinterest hurt much more. So? I am waiting. She spoke with a tone that surprised Yukiko at how cold it seemed. My father was hoping to arrange a marriage with Izuku. Katsuki nodded. I could get that much from your sister. Yukiko winced again at the sharp tone. Katsuki raised her hand, placing it in front of the face of Yukiko. If you say something like you don't love Deku, or that you like him to impress your father, I will blow up your face. Yukiko stayed silent and Katsuki looked to the floor with obvious disinterest. You know, Yukiko? I could care less of the marriage arrangement. I know mother-in-law would never let it happen if it was something forced. I could care less of that, but it's obvious you knew of that thing for a while, and you didn't say anything. Katsuki looked at her and noticed the sadness in her eyes. What makes me angry is that I thought you were serious in us being rivals. That you actually had enough trust as to tell us something like that? So what if you were being forced to marry? We could have thought of something. I am sure Deku would have helped too, so you get to marry whoever you want through your own terms. I would have helped. She sighed. For a small moment, Todoroki. I actually thought you were our friend. For one moment. I thought you were being honest with me. Guess I was the only one being honest. Katsuki walked away, leaving a stunned Yukiko behind. Katsuki had called her Todoroki. Not Cold Hands or Yukiko. She had made a big mistake without the intention of doing it. Katsuki Bakugo walked. She took out her phone and made a call to the number in speed dial. Could you come to my home? I will explain you there, thanks. She hung up and walked. She was surprised when she reached her home and saw a panting Izuku trying to get the air back in his lungs. He had run immediately at her home. Seeing him made her smile. Kacchan? What happened? I thought you were going to be with Yukiko. He didn't get an answer as she just walked and hugged him tightly. He hugged her back and took her to the inside of her home. He didn't want anyone to see her being so sad. She lied. She lied. She only hugged him tighter as he returned her hug. Izuku knew how lies were a big deal to Kacchan. When they were younger, a group of girls invited her to go out with them to go get ice cream. But the girls, in fact, were in a plan together with a group of classmates who wanted her to be away from him for a while so they could bully him about being quirkless. The boys didn't have the chance to try anything. Kacchan had decided to go tell him she would go get ice cream when she saw the small mob approaching him. A war cry and many explosions later, Kacchan had made sure no one else tried to bully him. One of the boys spoke up saying how she found out the girls didn't really invite her, how they failed to distract her. Kacchan had felt devastated at the idea the girls were lying. The idea that someone would lie to hurt them felt horrible. Back then she asked him if he could take her home and he did. She then proceeded to hug him tightly until she fell asleep. That had been in the past. But it seemed Yukiko had inadvertently brought up the pain from the past. Kacchan didn't like people lying to her. Much less if it was someone she trusted. So probably Yukiko made a mistake. Izuku took Kacchan in a tighter hug and proceeded to make circles in her back. I am sure she didn't mean it. Izuku would try to control the damage as much as he could. You don't get it, her dad was going to arrange a marriage between you two. And she didn't thought that was important to share with us. She placed her face in his chest as he held her. Well, the arranged marriage did sound like something you would mention to others. Surely she had her reasons, Kacchan. You know is not an easy topic. He hoped he sounded convincing. He heard Kacchan rustling and breaking the hug slowly, her sad face looking at him. You remember our last spar? He nodded. You said I won. He nodded again. We agreed the winner would get a kiss of the loser. He nodded slowly this time. He guessed where this was going. Let me kiss you. This took him by surprise. Kacchan. The girl looked at him with her eyes full of sadness. Deku, I know we agreed the winner would get a kiss of the loser, but I want to kiss you. I just want you to know that you mean a lot to me. That I am thankful you are here, that you mean the world to me. This was one of those moments, which reminded Izuku that Katsuki Bakugo, Kacchan, was an extremely sensible girl. Hiding under foul language and aggressive behavior, she was always a gentle girl with sensible feelings. And right now she was hurt. And just wanted to feel better after she had been feeling betrayed. She didn't trust in others easily. They had each other for the longest of times, so letting others in her circle of trust was a big deal. Ida and Ochako had earned the right because she took a liking to them. Yukiko had taken time. Moments like this reminded something else to Izuku. That Katsuki Bakugo lived with her emotions in her hands. As explosive as she was also one to be honest and direct. She was an explosion of feelings. Moreover, she never once denied her feelings for him. That every time Kacchan said she loved him, it was real and she meant it. He honestly had troubles answering back those feelings. Not because he didn't share them. Rather because he wasn't sure if he was worthy of them. Kacchan. The girl looked at his eyes, nothing but honesty in them. Please, just today? Izuku nodded and Katsuki smiled. She cupped softly his head on her hands as he closed his eyes. He was surprised when he felt the soft lips of Katsuki kissing his cheek and she released his head. His face reddened and his eyes showed surprise. The sadness in her eyes was gone and she was smiling, her usual smirk in place. Don't tell me you were expecting a kiss in the lips? That one is reserved for when we get married, but don't worry. I am almost halfway done with the money for the engagement band. Izuku hid his face in his hands as Katsuki spoke of the engagement band. But as embarrassed as he was happy she was smiling again, and he would lie if he said he didn't like the kiss of Katsuki in his cheek. He then felt her hands cupping his head again. Hey, where's my kiss, Deku? You owe me one. She smiled at him and Izuku could only think one thing. He was happy that Kacchan was happy again. Peeking through the room of Katsuki Bakugo was Mitsuki Bakugo, actually crying tears at the scene. That pair of dorks. Mary already DM'd it. Even though she was crying, she had filmed the whole thing and sent it to Inko Midoriya with a text saying Izuku would probably sleep in their home tonight. Both mothers agreed that Katsuki Bakugo was an adorable girl when she was with Izuku Midoriya. What Inko Midoriya didn't know was Mitsuki was looking for the prices on engagement bands. Maybe she could help her daughter. Plus, if Izuku married her daughter, she would probably hope Katsuki didn't curse so much. She had the right to dream it. The next day Izuku and Katsuki made their way to the school together. Ochako and Ida found them and walked together. When they saw Yukiko, Katsuki tensed slightly and walked faster. Izuku asked to Ida and Ochako if she could walk with her. He needed to speak to someone. He waited for Yukiko and greeted her. I believe you already know, but Kacchan won't like to talk with you. Yukiko nodded. She looked slightly down. I don't hold it against you, the marriage, but I would have liked to know. Yukiko kept looking down, but when she felt the hug of Izuku Midoriya, she let out a gasp of surprise. She wasn't expecting the physical contact. Both of you are my friends, and I don't like seeing you fight. It was all a misunderstanding, I am sure, but Kacchan has a story with lies, is not mine to tell you, but don't take it against her, okay? Izuku felt how Yukiko returned the hug and nodded. Thank you, Izuku. Yukiko smiled for the first time since the situation with Katsuki. Izuku smiled back at her. I am sure everything will go well, just give her time. Yukiko nodded. As Izuku broke the hug, he felt the hand of Yukiko holding his. Izuku, I really like you, and I didn't want to speak about marriage and... When she felt the hand of Izuku holding hers back, she stopped talking. I know. You had your reasons to not wish to speak about it. I know why, but Kacchan didn't. So don't worry, okay? We are still friends, Yukiko. As he wanted to keep walking, she stopped him. No. I don't want to be your friend. This made Izuku look behind and see the expression in the face of Yukiko. It was serious and brimming with determination, the sadness of before long extinguished. The school festival is coming. I challenged Katsuki. However, I am challenging you too. I want a date. Izuku's eyes opened in surprise as he screamed the word. Had Izuku not screamed, he would have heard the same scream coming from Ochako, Ida and Katsuki, who were seeing the whole scene as Ochako curiosity had made the group stay and hide to hear whatever was happening. Izuku, you have known Katsuki for years. And I have only known you for a while. But that doesn't mean my feelings will lose to hers. If I win the school festival, I want you to go on a date with me. I want you to give me the chance to show you how serious I am with my feelings. Izuku was surprised at seeing the usually calm Yukiko being so fiery. Katsuki had a point. I do love you. And I am willing to fight everyone to show it. Katsuki, who was seeing the whole scene, was angry at Yukiko. But another part of her was actually glad to see she was serious. It wasn't good for her rival to be weak. Unsurprisingly to Katsuki, Izuku nodded. I will give it my all in the school festival. But if I win, I want you to speak with Kacchan. I want you to tell her how you feel. Yukiko smiled and nodded. Both students were smiling, giving each other a handshake, sealing the deal. Katsuki was disappointed in the Yukiko who lied to her. But she could respect the Yukiko that was showing decision in fighting for what she wanted. But Yukiko wasn't done. Then, let me have this for good luck. In a move that surprised Izuku, she pulled him forward. There were a few facts in life. Izuku was shorter than Yukiko. Yukiko was taller than Katsuki. And Katsuki was taller than Izuku. Sure, it was easy to forget height when one measured strength against the boy with the power to level a building. Thing is, without the quirk and him being ready, Izuku wasn't too heavy to pull. So when Yukiko Todoroki pulled Izuku close to her for a kiss in the lips, Katsuki Bakugu was said. So said in fact that she ended up looking as if she was happy. Essentially Katsuki Bakugu broke. And Ida and Ochako saw this terrifying moment in which her grip broke the concrete of the wall they were hiding in. She ravaged the lips of Izuku. I haven't kissed his lips yet. How dare she steal a married man? Ida wanted to say they weren't married. He was promptly stopped by Ochako, who made him float away by pushing him. She was saving his life. In the current moment, Katsuki would kill whoever got in her path. Yukiko Todoroki was in heaven as she softly kissed the lips of Izuku and let him go. She walked with dignity and elegance. She was so focused in her happiness she didn't notice that she had greeted Katsuki Bakugu as if she was anyone else. Izuku Midoriya was red in the face, touching his lips at the fact the girl with the cold temper had seemingly kissed him. He could only thank Kacchan wasn't seeing him. When he spun and looked behind him, he saw the figure of Yukiko entering the school. Ochako praying to apologize and Ida floating away asking for help. Needless to say, Brain put together the scene. Yukiko! She screamed as she took Izuku by the arm, taking him to class, saying they would have a long chat later regarding he was a married man. The stakes were set. The bets were placed. And the school festival was closer than ever, with only a couple of days to start. 3 would go with all their might. Only 1 would get what they wanted. The wheel of luck has started to turn. However, who will be the one to receive its favor? Soon they would have to face each other. Who would win? The will of Izuku to prove he has what it takes to be the best. The feelings that live in the heart of Katsuki fueling her passion. The determination of Yukiko to prove she is her own being. There is only one way to find out. To be clear, Izuku Midoriya was thinking that the school festival was one huge dumb thing. No, it wasn't. He was nervous about the apparent betting going on over him. Of course not. That would be petty. Why would 2 people bet over him for starters? Just beat it out already. Izuku sighed. Honestly, the sports festival wasn't bad. It was just they did a mess beforehand. The race should have been something nice and simple, well, as simple as robots and minefields can make it. He had used one for all in his legs to get a really big lead. He almost won too. However, the problem of the beach happened again and he tripped close to the finish line. Which really wasn't that embarrassing, he even laughed it out. Thing is, in the giant screen to show everyone the events closer, Kacchan blasted the floor behind him to push him towards the finishing line. Helping others was forbidden, so blasting the floor and send him forward as the first place wasn't cheating. Oh, so sorry Deku. My explosion pushed you forward. What a lucky thing, right? If Kacchan could lie the way she could express her loud feelings, no one would have been able to notice the obvious lie. And if that wasn't embarrassing enough, Kacchan got into the 3rd place because Yukiko came sliding forward in the ice to catch him so he didn't fall headfirst into the floor, earning quite the amount of awe from everyone seeing the event. Therefore, the first event ended up with him in the 1st place, Yukiko in 2nd, and an extremely sad Kacchan in 3rd. Mitsuki Bakogu had been whistling when she saw the race from the stands next to Inko Midoriya. Well, the girl is hell smooth, coming sliding in ice like some ninja princess and picking Izuku? Smooth as hell, who wouldn't feel swept with that? Even though she spoke kindly, Inko noticed some underlying fear and worry. What's the problem? The matron of the Midoriya household asked her closest friend, who pointed to her daughter, held down by Midnight and Cementos together. Moreover, both were barely keeping her in down. That my rabid but daughter is said. She better doesn't get disqualified. Inko couldn't avoid giggling a bit. In a weird way, it was adorable how much Katsuki was seething in anger at the fact Yukiko saved Izuku of falling. Even though nothing would have happened. To be in love is so nice, right? Inko asked Mitsuki, who chuckled, pointing to her daughter trapped in a cage of concrete. Let me out. She is the criminal stealing a married man. Homewrecker. Everyone could hear the loud screams of Katsuki, some wondering what the hell was going on. Love is adorable, my daughter? She is as adorable as a rabid dog. Really, how can Izuku like her? She wondered as a scream came forward. I heard you, old hag. Where is your demon support? Inko was surprised. For a moment, she pictured Katsuki as a dog with the level of finesse in her ears. The second event had been quick. Hold me. As tight as you can. Don't worry, we got this. Those were the words of Katsuki and Yukiko respectively, as both used their quirks during a cavalry battle that was simply a crater after a huge explosion was contained into a dome of ice. Whatever team bands didn't turn into a crisp pass to the next round. And so Izuku was back in the present, fighting Ochako. A match that didn't favor him. Ochako just needed one touch to win, and he couldn't really approach. Izuku face-bombed. He could be so dumb at times. Katsuki, who was seeing the action as close as she was allowed to by Cementos and Midnight from her concrete jail, smiled. Oh, he thought of something. Cementos, who was keeping her in the cage, got curious. What do you mean? Cementos asked as she smiled. He is going to blow her away. Cementos didn't have much of a chance to ask as they heard two things. A loud but clap, and proclamation of ouch. Izuku focused his strength around his body, trying to make sure he wasn't putting too much strength into his arms, and clapped. The strength managed to release air pressure that sends a surprised Ochako out of the arena without hurting her badly. But it did leave Izuku with reddened hands. Turns out, clapping really hard does hurt. As Ochako had no way to secure herself to the arena, she flew away with the air pressure. Midnight whip assuring the girl wouldn't fly too far. Ochako sighed. She did expect something in the fight, just not that. Good match, Deku. She smiled, and Izuku returned the gesture. Cementos meanwhile looked at Katsuki. How come it doesn't anger you that she speaks to him? Cementos was curious as she had seen the girl almost jumping over the Todoroki girl had he and Midnight didn't intervene. What do you mean Ochako is my friend, our friend? Plus, she knows all the ground rules and follows them to perfection. Cementos was confused at that. Ground rules? Katsuki smirked. Let me enlighten you on the ground rules for girls who want to be near Deku. Cementos had yet to hear them, and he was already feeling the regret of asking. The matches between students were close to done. Only 3 students left. Izuku, Katsuki, and Yukiko. The next match was between Izuku and Yukiko. Katsuki had fought Ida. And the winners of the next match would meet her in the finals. In order to avoid pressuring Izuku, Katsuki chose to let him alone so he could think. Needless to say, Ochako was feeling the pressure in her hand due to the grip of the explosive girl. What if he needs my support? What if I should have said something and, why am I floating? Ochako sighed, thankful for the release in her hand as she undid her quirk effects, allowing Katsuki to come back down quickly. You were too worried. It's fine, you know Deku will be fine. Ochako didn't know how to follow that sentence, which made Katsuki groan. Kacchan? Will be fine. I mean, you two need to fight in the finals, right? The explosive girl nodded but looked tense. I am worried. If Deku loses, I will be facing Yukiko in the finals. Ochako was surprised that Katsuki was afraid of someone. She couldn't believe it. I don't want to humiliate her in front of everyone. What if her mom is visiting? Or her far family? How would she live after the beating I could give her? Ochako sighed in relief and laughed. Katsuki asking what was so funny. Truly, Ochako was overthinking it. Katsuki Bakugo would never fear any fight, nor any opponent for that matter. In a way, it was adorable how her worry was of how her opponent would feel of losing. Soon the stadium roared as Izuku and Yukiko met front to front. Izuku Midoriya, the strong man of 1A, against the prodigy of ice, Yukiko Todoroki. The crowd roared in excitement. In the stands, Inko and Mitsuki were holding hands. Mitsuki the most worried. Come on kid, beat that girl. She was worried, even if she wouldn't admit it. The girl quirk was strong, stronger than her own daughter. In a direct clash, it was more than likely that Katsuki would lose. Come on Izuku. Keep my daughter safe. Inko heard her friend and gripped her hands harder, hoping to send her goodwill to her. Soon, the match started, and everyone was surprised at how it wasn't Izuku who took the initiative. But Yukiko who went forward, her hand touching the floor the whole time as she let a wave of ice encompass the whole arena. Izuku was forced to jump, but to his surprise, the ice wasn't meant to encompass him. Only the arena. As he came back from the small jump to avoid the ice, he was met with the layer of thin ice in the arena that made him slip. His eyes focused on the smiling Yukiko Todoroki, who was using her ice to make blades on her shoes, right hand working to make the blades and her left side slightly burning to keep her temperature in the place. Everyone was surprised at seeing her using both sides. But no one more than Katsuki who was grinding her teeth. The fight had just started, and Yukiko already capitalized on the weakest point of Izuku. If you could remove Izuku from the ground, move his base, remove his footing, whatever you did that could remove him from solid ground, messed deeply with him. This was due to the nature of his power. Too much power required rather solid footwork to work with. Boxing always emphasized how to stand properly to throw a hit. And Katsuki knew that the trick of clapping wouldn't work with Yukiko, who could simply make a wall behind her or propel herself forward with fire. She could write? She hadn't seen much of the girl fire. But she didn't need to. Not when she started skating towards Izuku. His eyes opened in surprise as he tried to stand only to fumble and force himself to roll away from Yukiko's right hand that was trying to freeze him. The fight was different from any other so far. This fight wasn't one of the full power explosion. It was an extremely elegant technique. Yukiko skating around forced Izuku to move away as best as he could, and Katsuki noticed that the girl was using her quirk to encompass a circle around. Yukiko wasn't just skating to catch Izuku, she was acting like a shepherd dog, closing the area where Izuku could move and guiding him towards where she wanted him. The casters of the fight were impressed at the show of technique. It really shows she really thought of this matchup. If Midoriya can't stand up, his strength is not going to work. Aizawa spoke as his co-caster, Mike hummed. Wouldn't breaking the ice be good though? And Katsuki agreed. Breaking the ice would be a good solution, except for a problem. Each time Izuku punched the arena to break the ice, Yukiko would just freeze the arena again and use her left side to avoid frostbite of getting her due to constant use of her right side. Yukiko was showing her quirk to the max. Izuku was fighting a different problem. Ironically, the old problem Yukiko had. Frostbite. Each time he was hitting the ice to break it, a bit of it would remain on his skin, and Yukiko would make the ice slightly thicker each time. So slightly that it would be hard to notice it unless you were calmly measuring it. But in a fight? That was rather hard to do. Especially when she kept closing as a hawk over him. Izuku was getting desperate. This fight was showing Yukiko's skill, and while he was managing to pull his balance, he wasn't able to really get a hit on her. Each intent on actually getting a hit when she came close was met with her avoiding it by skating away. She had managed to make the arena her battlefield, capitalize on his weakness, and contribute to her strengths. This wasn't done on a whim, nor a decision on the battlefield. Yukiko had been thinking for long how to fight Izuku and Katsuki. She wanted to win. She knew the two of them were the biggest obstacles, so she truly considered how to fight the people she respected. Katsuki could maneuver in the air, blast her away, and in general just blow away anything in her path. Izuku had strength superior to both her and Katsuki. But he needed proper footing. She also knew that one punch was all Izuku needed to end the fight. So she would fight Izuku with precision and grace. Avoid contact and make the fight last longer. And the plan was working. Izuku was becoming more sluggish in his moves. She almost felt the need to hug him and stop him from freezing, but she decided against it. Yukiko was so focused in the fight she never noticed her father screaming for her to use her fire more. She didn't hear the casters. She was focused only on Izuku and his movements. She knew he only needed one move to change all. And she was getting ready as she saw him raise both of his hands to punch the arena. "I can't give up." Izuku spoke shuddering as he was readying his strength. But the punch would never come as he suddenly fell unconscious. "Fight is over. Quick, medics!" Midnight screamed as Izuku fell asleep in the arena, but Yukiko had been faster. Ochako was seeing as Katsuki did her best to stay in place as she saw Yukiko Todoroki hugging Izuku while seemingly eliminating the more urgent need to warm him. Ochako thought Katsuki was angry at how Yukiko managed to defeat Izuku. But that wasn't the case. It was a case of something more personal, deeper. Her nature. Her quirk would never let her do something like Yukiko was doing. But as she wondered of it, a memory came to her. A memory of when Izuku said her quirk was great. "You are thinking too much about the focus. You will be facing her next." "Ochako." Katsuki's voice broke the other girl from her thoughts on her friend as she looked at her serious expression. "Check on Deku for me in the infirmary. I have to focus to fight her." Katsuki's voice was full of steel and conviction. But there was no anger. In a way, it seemed respect was the more appropriate term. As Katsuki went down without waiting for Ochako's answer, she was walking with conviction. "Okay, cold hands. No, Yukiko, you showed everyone what you could do when serious. Now let me show you what happens when you mess with the one person I care the most in this world." Katsuki grinned ferally, making her way towards the waiting room. They would soon call her. And she would give Yukiko the fight of her life. Izuku was sighing inside the infirmary as Recovery Girl made sure he didn't have any injuries that were not seen at first hand. He was mostly hurt in his pride at how Yukiko beat him. It wasn't bad. A fight that got him in his pride wasn't such a big deal. Even less because seeing Yukiko fight gave him an idea on how to make use of one for all in a new manner. Though his smile had to cut short as he received a small poke with the cane of Recovery Girl. "What's up with you grinning like that? You lost, and in such a way too." Izuku just chuckled, stretching himself as he wondered how to explain it. "Yes, I lost. But I won too." Izuku smiled, confused the medical professional as she wondered if he didn't have brain damage she failed to account for. Seeing her expression, Izuku continued to explain. "Yukiko beat me, but it was a solid win. She fought with her strengths and used my weaknesses against me. If roles had been reversed, I would have done the same. It would have been dumb of her to just come at me and not expect me to punch back. Plus, because I lost, I got to learn a lot of weaknesses I had. I can now grow out of them." His words, making much more sense now, made Recovery Girl smile too. The boy hummed for a moment, looking at her. "Say, you have a notebook I could use?" She nodded and went for it. Izuku smiled. He needed to write a lot of things before they escaped him. How to fight an opponent who used the terrain, how to get an opponent that moved faster, how to defeat someone who could avoid contact. Izuku had a lot of ideas on his mind. With a smile, he focused on the screen where they were showing the next and final fight. Kacchan and Yukiko. Yukiko's main advantage was she was ready to fight physical fighters. But how would she fare against someone who had just received a buff in her will to fight? Izuku smiled. The hit to his pride had been worth it. Just break the arena. His mind wandered at the idea of just breaking everything and ending the fight then and there. But there was a deal that had to be done. A promise. Yukiko and Kacchan needed to fight and solve their issues. There was still tension around both of them. Izuku's mind wondered that he was about to clash the floor, feeling the power in his arms. They need to fight each other. But not in classes, they will just get in a mess. But if they fight in the finals, no one can complain, plus it will force them to take out all of their stress. This is my answer. Izuku let himself fall, letting himself lose all the strength and decided to just drop, forcing them to meet in the finals. There were no injuries to fix in Izuku. He could have kept on fighting. But he wanted both girls to solve their problems head-on. You lost on purpose, eh? Recovery Girl smiled as she brought the notebook, catching him off guard. You muttered all of what you thought. You need to learn to stop doing that. She chuckled as he embarrassedly took the notebook. Mind keeping the secret? Kacchan would never forgive me if she found out I let the match go like that so she could fight Yukiko. Recovery Girl started laughing. Only you would drop a match for someone else. Your secret is safe, on a condition. Izuku gulped. Seems that losing the fight would bring consequences. The final fight is here. 2 girls will fight for the number 1 spot. In the right, Yukiko Todoroki, the girl whose ice has shown to be a work of art. And in the left, the living explosion, Katsuki Bakugu. All the arena roared as they were presented. Mitsuki and Inko cheered for Katsuki in their own way. Kill that homewrecker. Stay safe, Katsuki. Inko received a stern look from Mitsuki. What kind of battle cry is that? Inko chuckled nervously as Katsuki smiled, hearing their voices in the sea of cries. In front of Yukiko, Katsuki looked confident. But there was a savage look in her smile. Her hands were not making the usual small explosions of before. Instead, she seemed to be focused only on her. Fight! The cry roared and Yukiko immediately went for her plan as before, freezing the arena. But she was surprised to see Katsuki smiling as she let her freeze the arena. She was confused. Didn't she know what she planned? In any case, she went ahead, the same strategy as before. Kacchan kept her smile and wild look. Yukiko wasn't sure what happened. 1 second she was skating her way to her, only to the next to be blinded. She cursed herself. She had been so focused on the expression of Katsuki she failed to see the girl making that blinding explosion of hers. Is troublesome not being able to see, eh? Yukiko couldn't offer an answer when a booming sound came and she grabbed her head in pain, as did the whole arena. Katsuki made an explosion to the sky, the kind that didn't do much damage, but sounded like thunder booming, and because Yukiko was at the epicenter of the said explosion, she was feeling a big pain. Get ready, I am going to punish you for what you did. Katsuki knew Yukiko couldn't hear her, or maybe if she did she wasn't able to answer. She didn't care. It was payback time. Katsuki let herself separate from the floor as she propelled herself in the air with explosions, going towards Yukiko and giving the girl a dropkick to the chest that sends her away. She was hoping with the ice around them that Yukiko would slide away from the arena. But that would have been too easy, so she was happy when the girl managed to stick herself to the arena by forming ice to keep her in place. But I am angry and you deserve what you are about to get. Katsuki kept propelling herself with explosions away from the floor. If Yukiko controlled the earth, that was fine. She had the sky to move around, that was way bigger. Yukiko's hearing came back and she focused on the fly in the sky. She made some pillars to get her back to the floor, but her intent was welcomed with a bigger explosion coming from the air, forcing her to shield herself with ice. Your ice is too slow for me. Yukiko cursed Katsuki, having the higher ground. Guess what isn't slow? This. Using her left side, a burst of fire came to life that Katsuki simply dodged by moving to the side. Being high in the air made Katsuki a fighting plane while Yukiko was more akin to a tank on Earth. She simply didn't have sufficient reach. Katsuki stopped her explosions, allowing herself to dive straight towards Yukiko. The girl was confused at the seeming suicidal drop, but was more surprised when Katsuki grinned and spun, releasing an explosion. This one, the painful kind. At having been taken by surprise as she was focusing on the offensive, Yukiko received the full brunt of the explosion. Had her instincts not been in place, she would have failed to make support behind her to avoid being tossed out of the arena. That's for not telling me the truth. Katsuki's wild look made Yukiko angry. What the hell you mean? Yukiko was confused as she stood up. With the heat, the arena was back to its solid state, with small puddles of water surrounding them. Katsuki pointed straight at her. You know what I mean. You didn't tell me or Izuku what was going on. Weren't we friends? Yukiko's eyes opened wide as she felt angry. Didn't we solve this already? I thought I had explained it before. Katsuki got ready to throw an explosion. This time Yukiko was ready but still got pushed back as her defense crumbled. No, you spoke, but you have yet to truly apologize. I trusted you, damn it. Katsuki roared as she took the air again. Yukiko noticed the girl was really getting some height now with her explosions and started to quickly make the thickest pieces of ice she could to protect herself from what she knew was coming. Eat this. The explosion from the sky came straight to the arena, its full brunt scaring the people around. Even Cementos felt for a moment the need to interrupt the fight but stopped himself as he measured the explosion. Contrary to what may appear, was controlled, it was aimed only for the arena. And even more, to the point where Yukiko Todoroki was. Katsuki smirked from the air, noticing how Yukiko had to stay in the defensive. She had to keep making ice and the frostbite started to appear. This was her plan. A focused blast of power. Izuku smiled as Katsuki showed him what she had found out. That's right. It's harder to make them this way because explosions naturally go all over, but by making sure the form of my hands is right, the majority of the explosion comes out straight. She beamed in pride as Izuku smiled at her. You've been working on this for a while, haven't you? She chuckled in one of those weird moments she felt embarrassed. You gave me the idea. You are trying to make your power go all over while I need to do the opposite, focus all in a single blast. That way I can stop collateral damage and focus on hurting only who I want. She smiled as Izuku smiled at her. Her plan was to force Yukiko on the defensive with her ice. So long as she made sure the girl couldn't use her fire, she would be forced to stick with her ice. Yukiko had obviously worked her ice to the point it was her most obvious focus of action. So, if she could force her to keep defending, the frostbite would come to kick her butt. She had a suspicion Izuku was to blame for this fight. He suddenly fell down when it was obvious he had full power on his arms. And that memory gave Katsuki an idea. It was time to close this fight. Literally. Aya! She screamed as she let explosions around Yukiko, forcing the girl to defend herself as she took to the ground and started breaking everything away with explosions. Yukiko was too focused in keeping herself safe as to notice what Katsuki had done. When the smoke cleared up, all the people in the public could be heard gasping in surprise. Katsuki Bakugo had blasted the arena except for its middle, leaving something akin to a roughly circular shape. Now Yukiko was without her usual mobility, her trick of making an ice rink was destroyed. But what's more, she was forced to fight Katsuki in close quarters. If the girl took to the sky, she would simply win with the superior reach. Without thinking it twice, Yukiko made a desperate move. Making a dome of ice surrounding the small rough circle, she had to stand with Katsuki. Said girl was cracking her knuckles as she looked at Yukiko. Close and personal, how I like it. Yukiko oddly found herself smiling as she stretched herself and went towards Katsuki. Out of the dome, Cementos and Midnight were confused. They couldn't really stop the fight just based on their inability to see inside, but they could hear a sound from the inside, and judging by the sounds, it was the girls roughhousing each other. Ah! The scream of Yukiko was followed with a thump as if someone hit a side of the dome. Beach! That was undoubtedly Katsuki. And followed by her war cry, another side of the dome had a visitor in it. Midnight was sure of something. Inside that dome, the girls weren't using their quirks. I trusted you. You didn't let me explain. Why would I? Because we are friends? F you. What's your problem? You. The words kept coming out and Midnight heard Aizawa's voice in her ear from her calm. What's going down there? Midnight chuckled. The girls are duking it out? I believe both aren't using their quirks. I believe is a pride thing. Aizawa groaned. Stop the fight then. She smirked and she was sure if Mike was hearing he would too. I believe we can't stop their fight. Let them roughhouse each other a bit more. She could hear the laugh of Mike. She smiled as she didn't hear as much action anymore, but it sounded like slaps. Did you slap me? Yukiko was surprised and angry. You deserve more than that. Izuku and I believed you were our friend. Yukiko was seething in anger. Why is this such a big deal to you? Yukiko returned the slap with one of her own. Because I don't have many friends. This time she didn't slap Yukiko. Instead, Katsuki just screamed it, surprising Yukiko. You don't know how it is to not trust anyone, fearing they act behind your back. Katsuki's eyes had small tears in them, her rage was still visible, but Yukiko guessed this wasn't about her anymore. I thought for one moment that I could trust you. And what did I get? Katsuki went to punch Yukiko, who didn't move, just braced for impact, and got the punch in her cheek. Katsuki was surprised at this. She didn't expect to get her. The form of the punch was sloppy. How did it work? Her answer came from a wobbly Yukiko. You really were hurting from this, weren't you? Do you even know how it is to be seen as nothing but a tool? Something to earn status? Yukiko stood straight and kicked Katsuki in the chest, sending her to the floor. Both were on the last reserves of their tanks. For one time, I actually thought something good was going on. I actually thought I had found something for myself. And it turns out he already has someone. Yukiko angrily looked at Katsuki. So forgive me. Forgive me if I wanted a bit of happiness for myself. Sorry if I didn't tell you of what happened, sorry for messing with you. But I won't say I am sorry for trying to be with Izuku. Her speech got cut short by a punch to the gut. Well, you better. Because that would make you the crappiest rival ever. Katsuki spoke as Yukiko punched her back. Well, that's great. 'Cause that would make you a crappy friend. Yukiko was about to punch Katsuki again when she fell to her knees. She wasn't used to the same level of physicality as Katsuki. Well, that's great. 'Cause I hate being angry at you. I actually want you to be my friend, damn it. Katsuki's declaration came out as she blasted the dome to pieces with a final explosion. Yukiko's figure was on the floor as she stood up. She roared at the sky as everyone in the arena was speechless. They didn't know what happened in the dome of ice. They only knew the girl that was roaring wildly to the sky standing had won. The fight is over. The winner is Katsuki Bakugo. Katsuki kept roaring as Yukiko was on the floor looking to the sky, cursing herself slightly. She didn't notice Katsuki was more sensible than she let on. She would need to chat with her once this was over, and she could stand. The awards ceremony was a rather nice issue, clean and quick. Izuku managed to beat Ida in the last round of the tournament to get third place. It had been a quick victory as Izuku took to break the whole floor. When asked about it by midnight as to why he didn't do that with Todoroki, he explained he was lacking strength due to the freezing. A lie. But it worked. The podium now had both girls in first and second place. Both looked slightly awkward. So much had happened inside the ice dome. So, Katsuki surprisingly took the first step with both of them when she grabbed Izuku and Yukiko by their arms. Get over here. She took both, earning confused glances from everyone in the public and the teachers as they saw what Katsuki took Yukiko and Izuku to her podium. The three standing in the number 1 position. Izuku was red as the close contact. Yukiko was embarrassed at being put in such a situation with both of them, even more, when she screamed, "Hey, when are we getting our medals?" All Might was the one who rushed there to give them their medals to each. Young Midoriya. He smiled, giving him the medal for third place. Yukiko was nervous but smiled nonetheless when the number 1 hero gave her the medal for second place. But Katsuki Bakugo was the one smiling the widest as All Might congratulated her. Nothing could ruin this moment for her. Crap. Cheap piece of wood. Why can't they? AF. Katsuki was screaming in frustration as she waited for Izuku to dress in casual clothes. He was getting out of the changing room as he spoke to Katsuki. Well, to be fair, there wasn't supposed to be 3 people on the podium for first place, Kacchan. Not now, Deku. Now is not the moment for logic. They had taken a photo of the 3 winners when the podium collapsed. Are you angry Yukiko fell over me? When the podium collapsed, Katsuki Bakugo tasted the floor. Izuku fell but managed to fall with his back, so when Yukiko fell, he managed to catch her. The moment had been cute, but as cute as it had been, it also meant romantic, and a romantic moment between Yukiko Todoroki and Deku was a moment that Katsuki Bakugo would never accept it happened. Especially because she knew everyone was taking pictures. As Izuku came out in a casual green t-shirt, he patted the back of his friend. Said friend smiled and perked at the physical contact before hugging him. He hugged her back. He knew inwardly, aside from what happened, she was extremely happy. Number 1. Kacchan had obtained the number 1 spot. She was the winner of the festival. Still, their early celebration was broken by a soft voice. Katsuki? Izuku looked at Yukiko Todoroki dressed in a casual t-shirt of a rock band and jeans. She looked relaxed and nervous. An odd combination. Can we talk? Katsuki looked at the girl before she looked at Izuku, hugging him tightly once more. You can go ahead, Deku, I will talk with her. Izuku smiled, nodding. He hugged his friend back before passing next to Yukiko and offering her a thumbs up as a sign of support. The girl smiled and her cheeks flushed, but they lost color when Katsuki was in front of her face. What do you want to talk about then? Both girls were sitting on a bench outside of the stadium. Izuku was sitting far from them with the mothers of both childhood friends close by. What do you think they are chatting about? Maybe they are making amends? Izuku was sighing, waiting. It didn't escalate. Both girls were sitting and both were having a hard time finding words. So, you. Both noticed they kept trying to speak at the same time before Yukiko sighed. I will go first, then you can do whatever you want, even blow me up in pieces. Fine. Fine. Katsuki accepted the offer to blow her up in pieces, would take it any other day too. I want to apologize for everything that I made you feel. It wasn't my intention to hurt you. Still did. Yukiko looked at the girl. I wasn't finished. I am sorry, Katsuki Bakugu, for hurting you, because I do want to be your friend. Yukiko looked at her straight in the eyes, full of decision without nervousness. But if you don't want to be my friend after all of what happened, I will understand, but I will keep trying and trying until you let me be your friend because you are nice. She smiled at her. Outside of having absolutely no class at all, your hair looking like a bird's nest, your lack of patience, your extremely short fuse, and being crass with language. She kept listing stuff in purpose that made Katsuki angry. Hey, not my fault, I am no nerd. Miss, I am the perfect ice princess. Peasant. Stuck up. Dumb. You are calling me dumb? I'm not calling you smart, that one is Izuku. You are the dumb explosion. Oh. Sorry, I am no ballet dancer, little miss, I am going to skate around. Izuku was hearing the discussion but found himself smiling. He could tell they were actually bonding, even if to the mother of Katsuki it looked like things were going out of control. So, we are friends again? Because you weren't my friend before. You weren't honest. Yukiko now did look hurt for a moment before Bakugu brought the girl into her arms and started messing with her hair. Bird's nest. You will be a bird's nest when I am done with you. Hey. You are my friend now. So get used to this. At that, Yukiko managed to separate from Katsuki and smiled at her. You mean it? Yeah. We are friends, cold hands. Yukiko. I know what I said. I am going to start calling you short fuse then. On what grounds? That I am the tallest of the two. She answered with a smug smile. You. Izuku smiled. Until both girls started grabbing each other's hair and he had to run to put a stop to it. Things were going to be fine. The day after the sports festival was the start of the long weekend for everyone. They would have an extra day to rest, which for Izuku wasn't bad per se. He could use the rest. The problem was that said rest brought in a problem. He was free. As in, no plans for the day, nor the long weekend. Which meant one thing and one thing only. That he was about to get a visitor. So, he took to go to take a bath and get dressed. It was early in the morning but he could just feel it. It was obvious and undeniable, like gravity. So, as he took to relax by taking a bath, Inko Midoriya herself was making the table for 3 people. It was a free day. So that meant that only one single person would come and visit them in the morning. It was early, yes, but you are never too early to make breakfast, especially when they knew Katsuki would be coming soon. So, the Midoriya household was active fairly early in the thought of their guest. This is why Inko felt it was weird to hear a knock on the door when the breakfast was about done. Katsuki always just opened the door and got inside without much trouble, plus the arrival time was weird too. She arrived like clockwork 15 minutes after the breakfast was done and barely 5 had passed. She is excited about spending the day with Izuku. Inko giggled to herself before going to the door. Morning ka. Yukiko? She got cut off at half the name when she saw the tall girl smiling kindly dressed in jeans and a t-shirt. She wore her long hair in a ponytail. Yukiko Todoroki was pretty, that was no theme subject to discussion, but she looked oddly happier from what Inko had seen in the girl's expressions. Sorry to intrude. I know it's early, but I was hoping to see Izuku. Inko found herself surprised but kindly invited the girl inside. Don't worry, Yukiko, Izuku is taking a bath, so you can wait for him here. Say, did you have breakfast already? The girl denied with her head. I must confess I kind of rushed here. For someone who rushed to her house, Yukiko looked oddly fresh. Her quirk? Did her quirk keep her at a nice temperature? Oh my, I am acting like Izuku. She thought with mirth as she invited Yukiko to sit at the table. I will be serving breakfast when Izuku is down here. Yukiko thanked her and sat in place. Inko prepared another batch of waffles. She knew that Katsuki would be arriving in less than 10 minutes. And that was the case indeed. When Izuku was coming down the stairs, Katsuki opened the door with glee. Morning, mother-in-law. Morning, Izuku. Morning, Yukiko. Yukiko. Katsuki finally noticed that in the table her nemesis was sitting at the table. She arrived earlier than me? What kind of trick is this? You. No raising the voice in the morning. Inko came to the table carrying food and putting it on plates. Katsuki groaned before taking a sit in front of Yukiko on the square table. Inko was sitting in front of Izuku to avoid any of the girls complaining. It was a rather nice setup. Morning Kacchan, morning Yukiko. The reason both girls were in the house was that early greeted each. Kacchan was expected. Yukiko is new to this. As surprising as it wasn't unwelcome. Plus Yukiko got to see a whole new side of Katsuki, the one who behaved at breakfast. The waffles were fluffy, the eggs were good, and Inko Midoriya made everything feel relaxing too. This is delicious, thank you. Yukiko offered a smile towards Inko, who shyly said it wasn't that big. Only for the girl with the explosive temper to agree with Yukiko. She is right though, everything is always good. You should open a restaurant, mother-in-law. That way I can get breakfast with Izuku and you every day. She was picturing Inko with her hair covered behind a kitchen bar and Izuku dressed in a similar manner holding a tray to his well-defined chest. Before she could keep daydreaming and even picture a name for the place, Izuku spoke. So, I am happy we are all having breakfast together, but I need to ask. He turned to Yukiko. Why did you come to visit so early? I know Kacchan always likes to do so. Hell yeah. She would have added more, but Inko's gaze reminded her she shouldn't interrupt people as they were speaking. Oh. Yukiko felt her cheeks getting warm. Well, to be honest, I wanted to invite you out. You know, make the best of the 3-day weekend. He found himself smiling at that. No way. I came out to do that. Inko sighed before starting to take the dishes away. Izuku decided to follow her, but she motioned he had to stay. Someone ought to keep peace and avoid quirks getting used. She spoke with a smile before going into the kitchen. I arrived first. Well, I have known him longer. You hog enough time with him as it is. Is called being married. I don't see any ring. I am working on buying an engagement band, okay? They aren't cheap. Their bickering kept going before Yukiko said something that stunned in place both Katsuki and Izuku. He owes me a date. Katsuki and Izuku were stunned in silence before the girl who could blow all of them into pieces turned to look into his eyes with calm. A smile of fun before she laughed, pointing between Yukiko and him. As if asking, are you hearing this? Isn't it fun? Tell me as a joke. Well, we did agree you would get a date if you won in the school festival, Izuku said. Yukiko nodded. At this, Katsuki excused herself from the pair before going to the sofa, inspecting a couple of pillows before finding one that looked good and screaming against it. And I did win against you. And technically we all won because in the picture we are all in the first spot. Plus, I did do my part of the deal and talked with Katsuki. She was really acting more like a lawyer than a hero. But Izuku could admit she did make peace with her? I mean, it does make sense in a way. He sighed. But if you want a date you could ask, he admitted with his cheeks feeling warm now. Katsuki kept screaming. She was having a hard time not blowing everything to pieces. I guess I do, but since I feel we won't be able to have a date now. Is good Katsuki is here. It is. The said girl stopped her rambling anger and immediately got curious. Would the two of you like going to the beach? She smiled at the pair, kindly making a gesture of prayer with her hands. Needless to say, both were confused. Turns out the Todoroki family had a house on the beach. Yukiko herself wanted to go with her sister and said sister insisted that she should invite her friends. That wasn't hard to do, she only had two. While she was starting to speak more to her classmates, she wouldn't say they were friends. But Izuku and Katsuki did fit the bill when it was related to friends. Introductions out of the way between Yukiko's sister and the rest were on a car to the beach. Fuyumi didn't need to know the group to know Izuku would be riding in the front and the girls would go in the back. Fuyumi Todoroki promised Inko to care for everyone, they would spend 2 nights and come back after that. Inko liked Fuyumi's attitude. Katsuki considered was a low blow. She considered that was using the family as means to make Inko prefer the Todoroki clan. Oh, you are lucky the old hag is bad at making good impressions. To be fair, Katsuki's mom was the best friend of Inko Midoriya. Still, the ride to the beach was a calm affair between the girls and Izuku, mostly cause Izuku and Fuyumi both were fanboys. Speaking of heroes. They are nerds, Katsuki said with mirth as Yukiko was sighing. They are. But both are cute. Katsuki looked at Yukiko. Hey, don't act so down, I also thought I would be sitting with Izuku here, but at least we are, friends. It was still odd to recognize they were friends again. Not even a day ago they ended up throwing each other in a bunch of ice and hitting and slapping each other. Friends, she said with a smile. Both were on better terms for sure. Needless to say, the beach house was big, not insanely so, but still big enough for 4 people. Though Fuyumi had set up 3 futons in a room. The girls immediately were deciding where they would stay if Izuku chose an extreme instead of the middle, only for Fuyumi to break those ideas. Izuku will be sleeping in a different room, we will be sharing a room. Fuyumi was a no-nonsense chaperone as she crossed her arms. I already told him to lock the door to his room at night and I will do the same here. So, anything else? The girls sighed before Fuyumi smiled, clapping. Well enough. Looking down, we came to the beach to have fun, right? At that the girl smiled. Indeed, that was the whole point, though for Yukiko the extra point was being away from her dad. Soon the girls went away to get dressed for the beach. Izuku himself had finished rather quickly getting ready for the beach. Sandals, a t-shirt, and swimming trunks. So, he was in the living room of the house near the entrance waiting for the girls. Fuyumi was the first to appear. She was dressed similarly to Izuku. Except her shorts were longer. She looked excited. I've been meaning to come to the beach for a while, it's nice to have some time free from work myself. She had asked for a free day to enjoy the weekend with her sister. Before Izuku could comment on anything, Katsuki came down the stairs roaring. The beach better get ready for me. She came down wearing swimming trunks and a swim shirt that fitted her nicely. How do I look, Deku? She was smiling, hoping for some approval, which she got from the red cheeks of his friend. But before he could comment and Katsuki teased, Yukiko came down to the surprise of both, in a wetsuit. A wetsuit? Katsuki was the first to question it. She was expecting the girl to wear something, well, revealing, if anything, to try to swoon Deku away from her. But to her surprise, Yukiko's cheeks were slightly red. I get burned easily on the beach. Both stayed silent, but it made a lot of sense. The girl was really pale. If she liked the beach, it was obvious she was going to be covered to avoid getting burnt. Izuku still thought she looked really cool in the wetsuit because it really suited her. When he noticed Katsuki's face in rage and Yukiko smiling, Izuku Midoriya understood he was once again speaking his thoughts aloud. Deku! Needless to say, a few explosions out of the house later, and the group was all set up on the beach. Fuyumi had brought an umbrella and set up a towel to sit and relax watching the trio. They had lost little to no time going in the direction of the water. Last to get in the water is a loser, Katsuki declared as the three of them took to run. At least, that had been the plan for three of them, but only two entered the water. Oh, Yukiko! The girl had brought out a pillar of ice just where Katsuki was going to walk, so she ended up slamming on it. The girl in the wet suit just laughed before enjoying the water with Izuku. Needless to say, their small trip to the beach was already fun, and it was just starting.